The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. For thousands of years, Jedi and Sith have drawn upon this power, shaping the fate of countless worlds through their mastery of the mystical field. But what happens when something arrives that operates on entirely different principles? When technology from beyond the stars crashes into a galaxy governed by the Force, the collision produces consequences that neither Jedi wisdom nor Sith ambition could anticipate. The Battle of Christophsis raged across the crystalline planet's surface with brutal efficiency. Separatist droid forces pushed relentlessly against Republic clone positions, their numerical superiority grinding down the outnumbered defenders sector by sector. General Anakin Skywalker deflected blaster bolts with mechanical precision, his lightsaber a blue blur as he directed his troops from the front lines. Beside him, his Padawan Ahsoka Tano moved with the graceful confidence of youth, her twin white lightsabers carving through battle droids with practiced ease. "Master, we're being pushed back on the eastern flank!" Ahsoka shouted over the cacophony of weapons fire. "Captain Rex says they can't hold much longer!" Anakin reached out through the Force, sensing Thebe and flow of battle across the crystalline towers. The Separatists were executing a pincer movement, trying to cut off their supply lines, while droidekas advanced under heavy artillery cover. Standard tactics, predictable and effective. He was formulating a counterattack when something else touched his awareness. A disturbance in the Force, unlike anything he'd ever encountered. The sky above Christophsis tore open. It wasn't a hyperspace exit. No ship materialized from the swirling blue tunnel of faster-than-light travel. Instead, reality itself seemed to fracture, a jagged wound of impossible colors bleeding across the atmosphere. Through that wound fell something small and burning, trailing smoke and energy signatures that made Anakin's instincts scream warnings his conscious mind couldn't interpret. "What in the blazes is that?" Ahsoka breathed, her Montral twitching as she too sensed the wrongness of it. The object, roughly humanoid in shape, plummeted through Christophsis' atmosphere like a meteor, its trajectory erratic and uncontrolled. Energy crackled across its surface, red and gold flashes visible even through the smoke and flames. It hit the crystal plains 3 kilometers from their position, with an impact that sent shockwaves rippling through the Force itself, shattering nearby crystal formations and throwing up a plume of debris that momentarily halted both armies in confusion. For 5 seconds, the battlefield fell silent. Clone troopers and battle droids alike paused, processors and instincts struggling to categorize the threat. Then the Separatist commander, a tactical droid with no capacity for wonder, ordered the advance to resume. "Ahsoka, with me!" Anakin sprinted toward the crash site, trusting Rex to hold the line. The Force pulled at him with unusual intensity, as if trying to warn him of something it couldn't quite comprehend. "Rex, establish a perimeter around that crater. Nothing gets in or out until I give the word." "Yes, sir!" The clone captain's voice crackled through the comlink, professional despite the uncertainty. "You heard the general! Move out!" They reached the crater in minutes, moving with Force-enhanced speed across the shattered crystal landscape. What Anakin saw made him ignite his lightsaber on pure reflex. A figure lay at the center of the impact zone, half buried in pulverized crystal. Humanoid, but encased in armor unlike anything in Republic or Separatist arsenals. The metal was sleek and red, accented with gold plating that caught the light despite being scorched and cracked. One arm was bent at an unnatural angle. The chest piece flickered with pale blue light that pulsed irregularly, like a failing heartbeat. But what drew Anakin's attention most was the face, or rather, the faceplate. A smooth golden surface with horizontal slits for eyes, now dark and lifeless. "Is it a droid?" Ahsoka asked, circling cautiously with her lightsabers raised. "I don't think so." Anakin reached out through the Force and felt something. Not the blank emptiness of a machine, but not quite the vibrant presence of a living being either. Something in between, or perhaps something the Force itself didn't know how to read. "There's someone inside that armor." As if responding to his words, the chest light flared brighter. The faceplate's eyes suddenly blazed with white light, and the figure's hand shot up, grasping Anakin's wrist with surprising strength. The Jedi tensed but didn't strike, sensing desperation rather than hostility. "Jarvis," Status. Report. The voice was male, filtered through damaged speakers, each word costing obvious effort. Where? What? Easy, Anakin said, using the Force to project calm even as his mind raced with questions. You crashed on Christophsis. You're in Republic custody. Can you understand me? The armored figure's grip loosened slightly. The glowing eyes flickered as systems struggled to maintain power. Christophsis? That's not possible. That's not even... Where's Earth? Jarvis, run diagnostics. Jarvis? Master? I'm getting energy readings from that chest piece. Ahsoka reported, her datapad scanning frantically. It's not Kyber-based, not plasma, not any power source I recognize. And the armor's composition. This isn't Durasteel or Beskar. I don't know what this is. Before Anakin could respond, the armored figure tried to sit up, servos whining in protest. More systems flickered to life across the suit, diagnostic lights running up and down the arms and legs. The chest piece, whatever it was, pulsed with increasing stability, as if drawing power from some internal reserve. Okay, the voice said, stronger now but edged with barely controlled panic. Okay, this is bad. This is really bad. Jarvis isn't responding, which means either we're completely offline or... The figure's head turned, taking in the crystal landscape, the distant sounds of battle, the two beings with glowing energy swords standing over him. Or I'm very much not in Kansas anymore. Not even in the same reality as Kansas. Anakin exchanged a glance with Ahsoka. The words made no sense, but the tone was universal. The voice of someone intelligent, injured, and desperately trying to understand an impossible situation. I'm General Anakin Skywalker of the Grand Army of the Republic, he said carefully, deactivating his lightsaber but keeping it ready. This is my Padawan, Ahsoka Tano. You crashed in the middle of a war zone. Before we can help you, I need to know, are you with the Separatists? The armored figure actually laughed, a sharp bark of sound that devolved into a pained cough. Separatists, right. Because today wasn't complicated enough already. The figure managed to sit up fully, damaged armor plates grinding against each other. Name's Tony Stark, and unless your Separatists are led by a giant purple guy with anger management issues, I'm pretty sure I'm not with anybody. I don't even know where here is. Captain Rex arrived with a squad of clone troopers, weapons trained on the armored stranger. General, Separatist forces are regrouping. We need to fall back to... He stopped, staring at Tony. What is that? That's what we're trying to figure out, Anakin replied. He studied Tony Stark carefully, weighing options and risks with the tactical mind that made him the Republic's youngest general. Whatever this armored warrior was, wherever he came from, his arrival had been violent enough to tear reality and powerful enough to register in the Force as a disturbance. The Separatists would have detected the crash. Count Dooku would want answers. And if Anakin was being honest with himself, so did he. The Force whispered warnings of pivotal moments, of futures branching in unexpected directions. This stranger, this Tony Stark, represented something unprecedented. In a galaxy at war, the unprecedented was either salvation or catastrophe. Rex, get a transport. We're taking Mr. Stark back to the command ship. Anakin extended a hand to help Tony stand. And someone get a medical droid. We need to know what we're dealing with. Tony accepted the hand, servos whining as the armor assisted his movements. Standing, he was slightly shorter than Anakin but carried himself with the bearing of someone used to commanding respect. Command ship. Right. Okay. He looked up at the sky where the rift had sealed itself, leaving only normal atmosphere. I don't suppose any of you have a genius-level physicist on staff, or a sorcerer? At this point, I'm open to either. Ahsoka tilted her head, confused. We have Jedi. They use the Force. The Force? Tony's faceplate somehow conveyed skepticism despite being emotionless metal. Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? He looked down at his damaged armor, at the arc reactor still pulsing in his chest. Well, Mr. Stark, you've survived aliens, gods, and an apocalypse. Let's see how you handle a whole new universe. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Resolute hung in orbit above Christophsis, its massive hull scarred from weeks of sustained combat. Inside the Republic Star Destroyer's medical bay, Tony Stark sat on an examination table while a medical droid circled him with increasing confusion. The armor had retracted into a more compact form around his torso, revealing Tony's face for the first time. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that moved constantly, cataloging everything in the room with the restless intelligence of someone who couldn't stop analyzing even under duress. Fascinating, the medical droid chirped in its mechanical monotone. Your biological readings are humanoid, but several internal structures don't match any species in my databanks. Your heart appears to have been replaced with an artificial device that generates an energy field I cannot classify. And these trace elements in your blood? Yeah, I'm a medical miracle, Tony interrupted, his attention fixed on the disassembled gauntlet lying on the adjacent table. Without his tools, without Jarvis, without any of his infrastructure, he felt naked despite the armor. Tell me something I don't know. Better yet, tell me where I can find raw materials. Palladium, gold, titanium if you've got it. I need to patch the armor before it becomes an expensive paperweight. Anakin stood near the doorway, arms crossed, watching the stranger with the analytical intensity that had made him a legend in the Clone Wars. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood beside him, stroking his beard thoughtfully. The older Jedi had arrived via hologram from Coruscant minutes after hearing Anakin's initial report, then commandeered the fastest ship available to witness this anomaly firsthand. Remarkable technology, Obi-Wan observed. The armor appears to be a fusion of prosthetic enhancement and combat platform. But Mr. Stark, you've been rather evasive about exactly where you're from. The scanners detected no ship, no escape pod. You simply appeared. Tony's jaw tightened. He'd been dodging that question since regaining consciousness, buying time to assess the situation. These people, Jedi, they called themselves, carried laser swords and moved with preternatural grace. The soldiers were clones, identical down to their DNA, engineered for combat. The technology was simultaneously advanced and primitive. Faster than light travel but no wireless networks he could detect. Energy weapons but ballistic principles. Artificial intelligence and droids, but nothing approaching Jarvis's sophistication. I'm from Earth, Tony said finally, meeting Anakin's gaze. A planet that, based on everything I'm seeing, doesn't exist in this galaxy. I was testing experimental technology, dimensional bridge research, theoretical physics that shouldn't have worked but did. He laughed bitterly. Turns out when you punch a hole between realities, sometimes you fall through. No return ticket, no GPS, no way home. The room fell silent. Ahsoka, perched on a counter near the viewport, leaned forward with wide eyes. You're from another reality? Like, a completely different universe? That's the theory I'm working with, Tony confirmed. Because unless your star charts are spectacularly wrong, none of the constellations outside that window match anything from Earth's sky. Different stars, different galaxy, possibly different physical laws. He gestured at the arc reactor in his chest, its glow visible through his shirt. This reactor runs on element synthesis that should be universal. But I'm getting power fluctuations I can't explain. Something about this universe doesn't play nice with my technology. Obi-Wan exchanged a meaningful look with Anakin. The Force, the older Jedi said quietly. It binds the galaxy together, flows through all living things. Perhaps your technology, operating on different principles, creates interference. The Force, Tony repeated, unable to keep the skepticism from his voice. Right. Space magic. Because my week wasn't weird enough. He slid off the examination table, ignoring the medical droid's protests. Look, I appreciate the rescue and the medical attention. But I need a workshop. I need to repair my armor, figure out how to compensate for whatever's causing the power drain, and start researching dimensional mechanics in a universe that apparently runs on mystical energy fields. You speak as though you plan to leave, Anakin said, his tone neutral but his posture shifting subtly. Not threatening, but ready. We're in the middle of a war, Mr. Stark. The Separatists will have detected your arrival. Count Dooku, their leader, will want to know what you are and what you can do. You can't just walk away. Tony's arc reactor flared brighter, an unconscious response to his rising frustration. Watch me. I didn't ask to be here, General. I don't know your war, don't know your sides, and frankly, don't care. My priority is getting home, or failing that, surviving long enough to figure out my next move. You crashed during a battle, Ahsoka pointed out, her Montral twitching with emotion Tony couldn't read. The clones are saying you're some kind of sign, that the Force sent you to help us. People are already calling you the Iron Knight. People are idiots, Tony shot back. Then he paused, processing the name. Iron Knight. That's actually pretty good. Better than some of my branding. He shook his head, refocusing. But I'm not a sign. I'm an engineer who had a very bad day. If your Force wanted to send help, it picked the wrong guy. Obi-Wan stepped forward, his presence somehow calming despite Tony's agitation. Perhaps. Or perhaps you underestimate what the Force has planned. Tell me, Mr. Stark, why do you wear that armor? What purpose does it serve beyond combat? The question caught Tony off guard. He looked down at the arc reactor, at the scarred metal that kept him alive. It keeps my heart beating, he said quietly. Literally. Without it, I'm dead. The armor is just the logical extension. Turn a liability into an asset. Turn survival into strength. A warrior's philosophy, Anakin observed with what might have been approval. Using your limitations to forge something greater. A survivor's philosophy, Tony corrected. I don't fight because I want to. I fight because the alternative is death, and I'm too stubborn to die. He picked up the damaged gauntlet, examining the cracked repulsor housing with a critical eye. Which brings me back to my original point. I need a workshop. Captain Rex entered the medical bay, snapping to attention. General Skywalker, Admiral Yularen requests your presence on the bridge. We're receiving a transmission from Coruscant. The Jedi Council wants a full report on the anomaly. Tony raised an eyebrow. I'm an anomaly now? Moving up in the world. They want to see you, Anakin clarified. Master Yoda specifically requested a holographic conference. He's very interested in understanding what happened. And if I refuse, then you remain confined to this ship as an unknown entity during wartime, Obi-Wan said pleasantly. I'm sure you understand the security concerns. However, if you cooperate, answer the Council's questions honestly, we may be able to provide resources for your research. The Jedi Temple has archives spanning thousands of years. If anyone has encountered dimensional anomalies before, it would be recorded there. Tony weighed his options. Pride demanded he tell them to shove their interrogation. Pragmatism reminded him that he was alone, stranded, and critically under-resourced. These Jedi might be sanctimonious space wizards, but they had infrastructure, knowledge, and apparently the political pull to access whatever he needed. Fine, he said, reattaching the gauntlet to his arm despite its damaged state. I'll talk to your council. But I want full access to your technical specifications, power generation, materials science, everything. And I want to know exactly what this war is about before anyone starts recruiting me for their side. Anakin's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. Fair enough. But I should warn you, the Jedi Council doesn't like being dictated to. Then they're going to love me, Tony replied dryly. Lead the way, General. They walked through the Resolute's corridors, past clone troopers who stopped and stared at the armored stranger. Word had spread fast. The man who fell from the sky. The warrior in red and gold who appeared from nowhere. Tony heard whispers as they passed, speculation and awe in equal measure. He'd been famous before, had dealt with attention from the moment he became Iron Man. But this was different. Here, he wasn't Tony Stark, billionaire genius. He was something unknown, something that didn't fit their understanding of reality. The feeling was mutual. The holographic chamber was circular, with projectors positioned around a central platform. Anakin gestured for Tony to stand in the center while Obi-Wan took position nearby. Ahsoka watched from the doorway, clearly excluded from official council business, but too curious to leave entirely. The projectors activated, and suddenly, Tony was surrounded by translucent blue figures. Most were humanoid, but the species varied wildly. Some human, others distinctly alien. At the head of the semicircle sat a small green figure with long pointed ears and ancient eyes that seemed to see straight through Tony's armor into his soul. "Master Yoda," Anakin said with a respectful bow. "Master Windu, I present Tony Stark, the individual who arrived through the atmospheric anomaly." A dark-skinned human with a stern expression leaned forward. "Mr. Stark, I am Mace Windu, Master of the Jedi Order. We have questions." Tony looked around the circle of holograms, at the warriors and philosophers who commanded armies and shaped galactic policy. Then he looked down at the small green figure, who radiated more presence than all the others combined. "So do I," Tony said, "starting with what exactly I've landed in the middle of." Master Yoda's eyes crinkled, and his ears twitched in what might have been amusement. "In the middle of a great war you are. But a war perhaps about to change, Yes. Changed already it has. By your arrival. The Jedi Council chamber on Coruscant represented 1,000 generations of tradition. A circular room with expansive windows overlooking the galactic capital's endless sprawl. Through the holographic connection, Tony could see the room's austere beauty. Simple seats arranged in a circle, no ornamentation beyond the implicit authority of those who sat there. It was a room designed to humble visitors, to make them feel the weight of Jedi wisdom and judgment. Tony remained standing, arms crossed, arc reactor glowing steadily in his chest. "The Clone Wars," Mace Windu explained, his deep voice resonating through the holo projectors, "began 3 years ago when the Separatist Alliance declared independence from the Galactic Republic. Led by Count Dooku, a former Jedi, they command vast droid armies funded by corporate interests, the Trade Federation, the Banking Clan, the Techno Union. The Republic defends democracy and freedom across thousands of systems." "With a slave army," Tony interrupted flatly. "Those clones? They're not volunteers. They're property, manufactured on some planet and programmed to die for a government they didn't choose to serve." The silence that followed was heavy. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Anakin's jaw tightened, while Obi-Wan's expression became carefully neutral. "The clones were commissioned before the war," Obi-Wan said carefully. "A gift to the Republic, discovered when we needed them most. They are treated with respect, regarded as soldiers." "They're slaves with better PR," Tony cut in. "I've dealt with enough corporate doublespeak to recognize it. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure you treat them well. Give them ranks and names and let them pretend they have choices. But at the end of the day, they were created to fight and die, with no say in the matter. That's slavery." Master Yoda's ears drooped slightly. "Uncomfortable truths, Mr. Stark speaks. But into a war already in motion, you have fallen. What would you do? Disband the Grand Army? Leave billions defenseless against separatist aggression?" "I'd start by asking questions," Tony replied. "Like who commissioned this army in the first place, and why they showed up exactly when you needed them. In my experience, coincidences that convenient usually aren't coincidences. They're manipulation." Mace Windu's expression darkened. "We have investigated the army's origins. The trail leads to a deceased Jedi Master, Sifo Dyas, who apparently foresaw the need for a Republic military. The mystery remains unsolved, but the galaxy is burning. We use the tools available." "Spoken like someone who's never had their tools turn on them," Tony muttered. He uncrossed his arms, forcing himself to focus. "Look, I didn't crash into your universe to criticize your war effort. I'm trying to understand what I'm dealing with. You've got your Republic fighting for democracy, fine. The Separatists want independence, also fine, depending on their reasons. Where does this Count Dooku fit? Former Jedi turned warlord sounds like someone with a story." A blue-skinned female Jedi with headtails spoke up, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Count Dooku was once among our greatest. He left the Order 20 years ago. Disillusioned with the Republic's corruption and the Jedi's role as peacekeepers. His fall to the dark side was gradual, then sudden. Now he serves as the Separatists' political leader while wielding powers we once taught him. Dark side, Tony repeated. That's the evil version of your Force thing? The Force has two aspects, Obi-Wan explained from beside Tony. The light side embraces peace, knowledge, serenity. The dark side feeds on passion, anger, fear. It offers quick power but corrupts those who use it. The Sith, ancient enemies of the Jedi, draw upon the dark side. Count Dooku is a Sith Lord now, titled Darth Tyrannus. Tony processed this information with growing incredulity. So, your galaxy has space wizards divided into good wizards and evil wizards. And you're fighting a war where one side is led by an evil wizard who used to be a good wizard. And you people use laser swords. He rubbed his temples. I'm starting to think the dimensional rift scrambled my brain. Mock if you wish, Mace Windu said coldly. But the Force is real, and the dark side has consumed countless lives across millennia. Count Dooku has killed thousands. His master, Darth Sidious, manipulates events from the shadows, playing both sides against each other. We suspect the Sith have orchestrated this entire war. That made Tony pause. Wait, you're saying there's someone above Dooku? Someone manipulating both your Republic and the Separatists? A Sith tradition, Yoda confirmed. Always two there are, no more, no less. A master and an apprentice. Dooku is the apprentice. His master, Darth Sidious, remains hidden. In shadows he works, pulling strings we cannot see. Tony's engineer mind immediately began modeling the scenario. A hidden actor with influence over both sides of a galactic conflict, prolonging the war for unknown purposes while remaining undetected. The scale was staggering, but the principle was familiar. He'd dealt with manipulation and hidden agendas before. Obadiah Stane had taught him that lesson in Blood and Betrayal. So you're fighting a war you suspect is rigged, Tony said slowly. And you're using an army that conveniently appeared from nowhere, created by a dead guy you can't question. Anyone else seeing red flags here? We see them, Anakin said quietly. But what choice do we have? The Separatists are real, their droid armies are real, the suffering is real. We can't just stop fighting because we suspect manipulation. Billions would die. No, Tony agreed. But you can start looking for the puppet master while you fight. Follow the money, the logistics, the political connections. Someone is funding this war on both sides. Someone profits from the chaos. He pointed at the holographic council members. And I'm guessing your Sith master is closer to power than you think. Probably someone respected, trusted, with access to everything. Mace Windu's eyes narrowed dangerously. You've been in this galaxy for less than a day, and you presume to lecture the Jedi Council on strategy? I presume to apply basic pattern recognition, Tony shot back. I've fought wars, Master Windu. I've seen what happens when you're so focused on the obvious enemy that you miss the real threat. Someone wanted this war. Someone benefits from it. Find that someone, and you end the war. Wisdom in his words, there is, Yoda said softly. But dangerous also, this line of thinking is. Without proof, only paranoia we have. And paranoia, to the dark side it leads. Then get proof, Tony insisted. You've got Jedi across the galaxy, fighting on dozens of worlds. Start paying attention to patterns. Who supplies the Separatists? Who votes for war appropriations in your Senate? Who benefits politically from Republic losses? He gestured at his arc reactor. I'm an engineer. I solve problems by understanding systems. Your war is a system, and systems can be reverse engineered. A female Jedi with a stern expression spoke up. And what of you, Mr. Stark? Your armor represents technology beyond current Republic standards. The energy readings from that device in your chest are unlike anything we've encountered. In a war where technology determines victory, you are a weapons platform of unknown capability. Where do your loyalties lie? There it was, the question Tony had been expecting since the conversation began. He looked around the circle of holograms, at the warriors and politicians trying to categorize him as asset or threat. My loyalty is to survival, he said bluntly. I don't know you people. I don't know your war. I crashed here by accident, and my priority is finding a way home or, failing that, staying alive long enough to build a life in this reality. That means I'm not joining your Republic. I'm not joining the Separatists. And I'm definitely not taking orders from space wizards who think they know better than everyone else. Then you are a neutral party in a galactic conflict, Mace Windu stated. That neutrality will not protect you. Both sides will seek to recruit or eliminate you. Let them try, Tony replied with more confidence than he felt. The armor was damaged, his resources limited, and he was alone in a galaxy that operated on principles he didn't understand. But he'd faced worse odds before. I've dealt with gods, monsters, and megacorporations. I can handle your politics. Yoda's eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval or concern. Handle them, perhaps you can. But understand them, do you? The Force moves in ways technology cannot predict. A disturbance you are, Mr. Stark. A variable in a carefully balanced equation. Change you will bring, whether you intend to or not. Story of my life, Tony muttered. Obi-Wan stepped forward, his diplomatic instincts apparently sensing the conversation was deteriorating. Masters, perhaps we should offer Mr. Stark what assistance we can. He requires materials and information. In exchange, he could provide insights into the technology we're facing. His perspective as an outsider might reveal what we've missed. And if he sells those same insights to the Separatists? Another council member challenged. Tony laughed harshly. I don't work for fascists or corporations masquerading as revolutionaries. You want to know my moral line? I've seen what happens when powerful weapons fall into the wrong hands. Mostly because I used to be the wrong hands. I spent years building weapons that killed people I never met, profiting off wars I didn't understand. Then I got a front row seat to the consequences. He tapped the arc reactor. This isn't just a power source. It's a reminder of what happens when you stop asking questions about who you're arming and why. The council members exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them through methods Tony couldn't detect. Finally, Yoda spoke. A workshop you need. Materials and information. Grant this, we will, on Coruscant. To the temple, you will come. Study our archives, repair your armor, and share what wisdom you can offer. But watched you will be, Mr. Stark. Trust. Earned it must be. Fair enough, Tony agreed. I wouldn't trust me either. Mace Windu leaned forward one last time. Understand this, Mr. Stark. The Force brought you here for a reason. Whether that reason serves the light or the dark remains to be seen. Do not underestimate the power of destiny in this galaxy. I don't believe in destiny, Tony replied. I believe in choices. Every single day, you choose who you are and what you stand for. Your Force can push all it wants. I'm still the one who decides where I go. The holograms flickered and died, leaving Tony alone in the chamber with Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka. The young Padawan looked at him with undisguised admiration, while the two Jedi Knights wore expressions of calculation and concern. That went well, Tony said dryly. You just told the Jedi Council they were blind, paranoid, and complicit in slavery, Anakin observed. And you're still standing. I'm almost impressed. Almost? You also insulted the Force, questioned our wisdom, and refused to ally with the Republic in a war for survival. That's going to make you enemies, Stark. Tony shrugged, the armor's servos whirring softly. Wouldn't be the first time. So when do we leave for Coruscant? I've got an armor to rebuild, and a mystery Sith master to help you find. Should be fun. Obi-Wan stroked his beard. A gesture Tony was beginning to recognize as the Jedi's way of processing complicated situations. You truly intend to help us investigate Darth Sidious? I intend to understand the game board before someone tries to make me a game piece, Tony corrected. If your Sith master is manipulating this war, he's going to notice the anomaly that just dropped into his carefully orchestrated plan. Better to find him before he finds me. Sound reasoning, Obi-Wan admitted. Though I suspect Master Windu would prefer you showed more deference to the Council's authority. Master Windu can get in line behind every other authority figure I've disappointed, Tony replied. Now, about that workshop. Coruscant gleamed beneath the Resolute like a jewel of civilization, its entire surface transformed into one endless city, spanning pole to pole. Trillions of beings lived in the vertical metropolis, their lives stacked in layers that reached kilometers into the sky. To Tony Stark, viewing the planet from the transport shuttle, it represented both humanity's greatest achievement and its most profound arrogance, reshaping an entire world in service of bureaucracy and politics. Impressive, he admitted, watching traffic streams flow between towers in organized chaos. Speeders by the millions moved through designated sky lanes, their navigation apparently coordinated by systems he couldn't detect. How do you manage traffic control on this scale without a centralized AI network? Droids, Ahsoka explained from the co-pilot seat. She'd volunteered to escort Tony planetside, much to her master's apparent resignation. Navigation computers in each speeder, traffic control droids at major intersections, and the Force helps pilots avoid collisions. Space magic air traffic control, Tony muttered. Of course. He turned to Anakin, who piloted the shuttle with casual expertise. Your council said I'd have access to a workshop. Please tell me it's not some meditation room where I'm expected to commune with the universe while I work. Anakin grinned. The temple has engineering bays, mostly for starship maintenance and lightsaber construction, but the tools are sophisticated. Master Windu assigned one of the lower-level facilities for your use. It's isolated from sensitive areas, monitored constantly, and has restricted access to the temple's main systems. So, I'm under house arrest. You're an unknown variable with advanced technology during wartime, Obi-Wan pointed out from the passenger compartment. Be grateful they're offering resources at all. Many council members argued for keeping you confined to a cell until we verified your story. Tony couldn't argue with that logic. In their position, he would have done the same, probably worse. Still, the restrictions chafed. He needed freedom to work, to experiment, to understand this universe's physical laws and how they interfered with his technology. Working under surveillance would slow him down, limit his options. The shuttle descended through Coruscant's atmosphere, entering the sky lanes with practiced ease. The Jedi Temple rose ahead of them. A massive ziggurat of ancient stone crowned with 5 distinctive spires. It dominated the surrounding district despite being dwarfed by many of Coruscant's modern towers. A monument to an older era when the Jedi were revered as guardians rather than generals. The temple has stood for 1,000 generations, Obi-Wan said, following Tony's gaze. Through the rise and fall of empires, wars, and peace, the Jedi have endured. Its archives contain knowledge spanning millennia. History, science, philosophy, records of Force phenomena from across the galaxy. And dimensional anomalies? Tony asked hopefully. Previous cases of people falling through reality? Unknown, Obi-Wan admitted. The archives are vast, and much knowledge was lost during ancient conflicts. But the librarian, Jocasta Nu, is remarkably thorough. If such incidents were recorded, she'll find them. The shuttle landed on one of the temple's many platforms. Clone troopers stood guard, their white armor gleaming in Coruscant's sun. They snapped to attention as Anakin emerged, their discipline absolute. Tony followed, his damaged armor drawing stares from passing Jedi. Younglings training in a courtyard, Padawans hurrying between lessons, knights returning from missions. He felt the weight of their attention, the curiosity mixed with suspicion. A protocol droid waited near the landing platform, its golden plating polished to mirror brightness. General Skywalker, Master Kenobi, I am C-3PO, Human-Cyborg Relations. I have been assigned to escort Mr. Stark to his workspace and provide translation services should he require. Oh my. That armor is quite extraordinary. Is it Mandalorian? No. The design is entirely different. Fascinating. It's Earth technology, Tony said, already liking the droid's enthusiasm more than the Jedi's guarded caution. Custom built, one of a kind. You're a protocol droid? Indeed, sir. Fluent in over 6 million forms of communication. I am also programmed with extensive knowledge of galactic customs. Though I must say, I've never encountered anyone quite like you before. That's what they all say, Tony replied. Lead the way, Goldenrod. C-3PO, sir? But I suppose Goldenrod is serviceable. They walked through the temple's corridors, past walls carved with ancient Jedi philosophy and chambers where masters taught Padawans the ways of the Force. Tony cataloged everything: exit routes, security measures. The way Jedi moved with unconscious grace that suggested constant awareness of their surroundings. His engineer's mind built a map, noting weaknesses and strengths in the architecture. The workshop occupied a large chamber in the temple's lower levels, away from meditation halls and living quarters. It was clearly designed for practical work. Tool stations lined the walls, fabrication equipment stood ready for use, and diagnostic scanners of surprising sophistication monitored energy flows and material properties. Parts bins contained components Tony didn't recognize, metals and crystals and power cells that operated on principles he'd need to study. "It's not MIT's lab, but it'll do," Tony said, already moving to examine the equipment. "C3PO, I need a complete inventory of available materials. Specifically, what you use for energy storage, conductive metals, and anything approximating transistor or microprocessor technology." "Right away, sir." The droid began cataloging items with mechanical efficiency. Anakin lingered near the entrance. "I'm due in the council chambers, debriefing from Christophsis. Ahsoka will stay nearby if you need anything." "I'll be fine," Tony assured him, already disassembling the damaged gauntlet with practiced efficiency. "Go save the galaxy. I've got repairs to make." After the Jedi departed, Tony worked in focused silence, his hands moving through familiar routines even as his mind raced. The armor's damage was extensive but repairable. Cracked housing, fried circuits, depleted power cells. The arc reactor itself remained stable, its energy output consistent despite the dimensional transition. That was good. If the reactor had been compromised, he'd be dead within weeks as the shrapnel around his heart slowly killed him. But the power fluctuations remained troubling. Every time he activated the repulsors or attempted flight, energy efficiency dropped by 15%. The reactor compensated, drawing more heavily on its palladium core, but that was a temporary solution. In this universe, his technology operated at reduced capacity, and he didn't understand why. "C3PO, what do you know about the Force?" Tony asked without looking up from his work. "Specifically, how it interacts with technology." The droid tilted its head. "Oh my, that's quite a complex question, sir. The Force is described as an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. As for technology, well, droids like myself don't register in the Force, which some Jedi find philosophically troubling. But Force-sensitive individuals can use their abilities to manipulate technology, moving objects, interfacing with computers, occasionally causing malfunctions through electrical disruptions." Tony paused, considering. "So the Force can generate electrical interference, and it's everywhere, created by living beings." He looked down at the arc reactor. "My armor runs on electromagnetic principles. If this universe's baseline energy state includes Force interference, that would explain the efficiency loss. I'm fighting against universal background noise." "That sounds most inconvenient, sir." "Inconvenient," Tony agreed, "but solvable. I need to understand the Force's energy signature, then redesign the armor's shielding to compensate. Which means I need data on Force phenomena, energy readings, measurements, anything quantifiable." "The archives might contain such information," C3PO suggested. "Though I should warn you, many Jedi consider the Force beyond scientific analysis. They view it as something to be felt, not measured." "Everything can be measured," Tony replied confidently. "Even magic, once you understand its rules." He began reassembling the gauntlet with replacement parts from the workshop, his movements precise despite the unfamiliar components. "Tell me about this Count Dooku. The Jedi said he was one of them before he turned evil. What drives someone to switch sides like that?" C3PO's vocabulator produced what might have been a sigh. "I'm afraid I don't have detailed psychological profiles, sir. But from what I understand, Count Dooku became disillusioned with the Republic's corruption and the Jedi Council's unwillingness to act decisively. He believed the galaxy needed stronger leadership, less democracy, and more order through power. The Sith offered him that power. So he's not just evil for evil's sake," Tony mused. "He's a true believer. Those are the dangerous ones, people who think they're doing the right thing while burning the galaxy down." He tested the repaired gauntlet, watching energy flow through restored circuits. And this Darth Sidious? The master pulling strings? Unknown, sir. Even the Jedi Council doesn't know his identity. He operates from shadows, manipulating events through intermediaries. Very little is known about him except that he's extraordinarily powerful and patient. Tony filed that information away. A hidden actor with decades, possibly centuries, to plan, operating at the highest levels of galactic power. The scope was intimidating, but the principle remained simple. Find the pattern, follow the connections, expose the conspiracy. He'd done it before with Obadiah, with the 10 rings, with every enemy who thought they could hide behind proxies and shell corporations. Hours passed as Tony worked, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of engineering. The armor slowly came back together, reinforced and modified with Republic technology where necessary. The arc reactor pulsed steadily in his chest, a constant reminder of mortality and determination. He was alone in a strange universe, but he had his mind, his skills, and his refusal to give up. That would have to be enough. A knock at the workshop door broke his concentration. "Come in," he called, expecting Ahsoka or another Jedi checking on him. Instead, a woman in senatorial robes entered, human, beautiful, with elaborate hair and an expression of controlled concern. Behind her walked a security detail and, more surprisingly, Anakin Skywalker looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Mr. Stark," the woman said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of a politician. "I'm Senator Padme Amidala of Naboo. I've heard remarkable things about your arrival." Tony set down his tools, studying the newcomer with interest. Anakin stood close to her, closer than a Jedi general should stand to a politician. Body language spoke volumes, protective posture, unconscious proximity, the way his eyes tracked her movements. Interesting. "Senator," Tony replied, wiping grease from his hands. "Not often I get visits from politicians while working. Usually they wait until I've built something useful, then try to regulate or weaponize it." Padme smiled slightly. "I'm here neither to regulate nor weaponize. I'm here because you said something to the Jedi Council that resonated with me. That someone is manipulating both sides of this war. I've long suspected the same, but lacked evidence or allies willing to investigate." Tony's interest sharpened. A politician willing to question the war effort? That was either remarkably brave or remarkably naive. "What makes you think I'm an ally?" "You're an outsider," Padme said simply. "You have no stake in Republic politics, no reason to protect the corrupt or powerful. And Anakin speaks highly of your intelligence, if not your diplomacy." She glanced at the Jedi with obvious affection. "My diplomacy is fine," Tony protested. "It's everyone else who's too sensitive." Anakin actually smiled. "See what I mean?" Padme moved closer, examining the partially repaired armor with genuine curiosity. "This technology is extraordinary. Nothing like it exists in Republic arsenals. The Separatists would kill for even a fraction of your capabilities." "Good thing I'm not selling," Tony replied. "You mentioned investigating the war's manipulation. What have you found?" The senator's expression darkened. "Patterns. The Senate votes to expand executive powers, giving Supreme Chancellor Palpatine more authority with each emergency. Bills that should pass languish in committees while military appropriations sail through. Senators who question the war effort find themselves discredited or removed from key positions. It's subtle, coordinated, and terrifyingly effective." "Political manipulation 101, Tony observed. Create a crisis, offer solutions that expand your power, eliminate opposition. Someone's playing the long game." He paused. "This Supreme Chancellor, how long has he been in office?" "Nearly 14 years, Padme said. His term should have ended years ago. But he's been granted emergency extensions due to the crisis. He keeps promising to relinquish power once the war ends, but the war never seems to end." Tony and Padme locked eyes, understanding passing between them. Anakin looked between them, confusion evident. "What?" the Jedi asked. "Your Supreme Chancellor," Tony said quietly, "is either your Sith Lord or working for him. That's the pattern. Perpetual crisis, consolidated power, elimination of oversight. I've seen it before. Hell, I've accidentally enabled it before. He turned to Padme. You're investigating Palpatine? Carefully, she admitted. Very carefully. He's beloved by many, respected by the Senate, and has the full support of the Jedi Council. Accusing him without proof would destroy me politically and accomplish nothing. Then we need proof, Tony said. He looked at Anakin. Your boyfriend isn't going to like this. Anakin's face flushed. We're not. Please, Tony interrupted. I've spent 5 minutes with you two, and it's painfully obvious. Don't worry, I won't tell your Jedi bosses, but if we're going to investigate the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, we need to be honest with each other. No secrets, no political games. Just facts. Padme studied Tony for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Facts. I can work with facts. She extended her hand. Welcome to Coruscant, Mr. Stark. I suspect your arrival is going to complicate many carefully laid plans. Tony shook her hand, feeling the calluses of someone who'd held weapons despite their political station. This senator was more than she appeared, a fighter hiding behind diplomacy, much like he'd been a warrior hiding behind corporate suits. Complicating plans is my specialty, Tony replied. Now let's talk about finding a Sith Lord. The holographic image of Count Dooku flickered in the darkened chamber aboard the Invisible Hand, the Separatist flagship. The Count's aristocratic features remained composed despite the news his intelligence officers had delivered. An anomaly on Christophsis, an armored warrior falling from the void, now residing in the Jedi Temple under Republic protection. Intriguing, Dooku murmured, studying the grainy footage captured by Separatist surveillance droids before Republic forces destroyed them. The armor was unlike anything in current galactic arsenals, sleek, integrated, powered by an unknown energy source. General Grievous, what do your analysts conclude? The cyborg general stepped forward, his mechanical body whirring with barely contained aggression. A weapon count, advanced technology, possibly from the unknown regions. The Republic will attempt to reverse engineer it, mass produce it. We should strike now, eliminate this threat before we understand what we're dealing with, Dooku interrupted smoothly. Patience, General. Rushing to destroy something we don't comprehend is the Jedi's mistake, not ours. He studied the image more closely, focusing on the chest piece that glowed with pale blue light. This energy signature, it doesn't register as any known power source, not plasma, not Tibanna gas, not even refined coaxium. Then what is it? Grievous demanded. That, said a third voice, cold and layered with power that made even Dooku straighten slightly, is what you will discover. The hologram of Darth Sidious materialized beside Dooku's display, the Sith Lord's face hidden beneath a dark hood. Even through the holographic projection, his presence dominated the chamber. Grievous instinctively stepped back while Dooku bowed with practiced deference. My master, Dooku acknowledged. I was preparing to dispatch agents to investigate this anomaly. More than an anomaly, Sidious corrected. A disruption. I felt it through the Force, reality itself tearing to admit something foreign to our universe. This warrior, this Iron Man, as the Republic soldiers call him, operates outside the natural order. He is not bound by the Force, not predictable through precognition or foresight. Then he is dangerous, Dooku observed. He is opportunity, Sidious countered. The Jedi Council believes they can control him, study him, perhaps recruit him. They are wrong. This Tony Stark recognizes corruption and manipulation. He said as much to their faces. He questions their slave army. Suspects hidden agendas, refuses to bow to their authority. The hooded figure leaned forward. Such a man can be turned, Lord Tyrannus, not through fear or anger as we would turn a Jedi, but through reason and pragmatism. Dooku considered this carefully. His master's plans operated on timescales measured in decades, with contingencies for every outcome. If Sidious saw opportunity in this dimensional refugee, there was an angle Dooku needed to understand. You wish me to approach him? Offer him resources, knowledge, perhaps alliance with the Separatist cause? I wish you to offer him truth, Sidious replied. Truth about the Republic's corruption, the Jedi's failures, the futility of their war. But approach carefully. This one is intelligent, cynical, and deeply suspicious of those who claim to offer help. He will see manipulation coming from parsecs away. Then how do I gain his trust? By giving him what the Jedi cannot: honesty about their flaws, acknowledgement of their mistakes, and respect for his autonomy. The Jedi will try to guide him, shape him, turn him into their weapon. You will offer him freedom to choose his own path. Sidious's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. And when he sees the Republic for what it truly is, when he understands the Jedi's complicity in this war's atrocities, he will reject them. What he does afterward, that remains to be seen. Dooku bowed again. As you command, my master. I will make contact. Do not reveal yourself immediately, Sidious cautioned. Let him settle. Let him investigate. Let him discover the Republic's rot on his own. Then approach as a fellow dissenter, a former Jedi who saw the same truths he now sees. Bond over shared disillusionment. The hologram faded, leaving Dooku alone with Grievous and his thoughts. The cyborg general growled in frustration. We should simply destroy him. Send assassins, bomber droids, orbital strikes, and prove to him that we are exactly what the Republic claims, Dooku interrupted. No, General. This requires subtlety. Begin monitoring his activities in the Jedi Temple. I want to know who he speaks with, what he researches, every question he asks. When the time comes to make contact, I must understand this Tony Stark completely. And if he refuses your overtures? If he sides with the Republic despite everything? Dooku's hand drifted to his lightsaber, the elegant curve of its hilt a reminder of the power he'd mastered. Then we eliminate him, quickly and thoroughly. But I suspect that won't be necessary. Any man who questions the Jedi Council so boldly is already halfway to our side. He simply doesn't know it yet. Back in the Jedi Temple workshop, Tony had transformed the space into something resembling organized chaos. Holographic displays projected Republic technical specifications alongside his own designs, comparing power systems and energy transfer principles. Parts from a dozen different projects littered the workbenches: repulsor components, circuit boards, power cells in various states of disassembly. C-3PO stood in the corner, doing his best to stay out of the way while providing constant commentary. Oh my, sir, are you certain that's wise? Connecting a Republic power cell directly to your chest device seems terribly dangerous. Relax, Goldenrod, Tony replied without looking up. I'm testing energy conversion rates. If I can get the arc reactor to efficiently process whatever energy source you people use, I can extend my operational time indefinitely. He made a notation on the holographic display. Your power cells use ionized plasma in a magnetic containment field. Crude but effective. The efficiency is terrible by my standards, but it's compatible with the reactor's conversion processes. The workshop door opened, admitting Ahsoka Tano carrying a tray of food. Master Skywalker said you've been working for 18 hours straight. He thought you might need sustenance. Tony glanced at the chronometer, surprised to find she was right. Time disappeared when he worked, a familiar pattern that had defined most of his adult life. Food, right. That's a thing people need. He accepted the tray, examining the unfamiliar cuisine with suspicion. What is this? Jedi Temple standard fare, Ahsoka said cheerfully. Protein paste, vegetable medley, nutrient supplements. It's not exciting, but it keeps you alive. Sounds delicious, Tony deadpanned. But he ate anyway. His body needed fuel, even if his mind wanted to keep working. How goes the war? Any new developments in the democracy versus corporate oligarchy conflict? Ahsoka perched on a workbench, swinging her legs. We recaptured Christophsis after you left. The Separatists are withdrawing from the Outer Rim to reinforce their positions in the Mid-Rim. Master Yoda thinks they're planning something big, but we don't know what. Classic misdirection, Tony observed. Draw attention to one front while preparing the real attack elsewhere. Your Count Dooku knows what he's doing. He was one of the greatest Jedi, Ahsoka said quietly. Master Yoda's apprentice, actually. They say his lightsaber form was perfect, his understanding of the Force unmatched. Then he just left, walked away from everything. Why? The young Togruta hesitated, her montrals twitching with uncertainty. The official story is that he fell to the dark side, became corrupted by power. But some of the older masters say he left because he disagreed with the Council's decisions. He thought the Jedi were becoming too passive, too willing to serve a corrupt republic. Tony set down his food, giving Ahsoka his full attention. And what do you think? I think... She paused, clearly uncomfortable questioning Jedi doctrine. I think maybe he saw things that needed changing but chose the wrong way to change them. The Separatists kill innocent people, bomb cities, enslave populations. Even if the Republic is flawed, that doesn't justify what Dooku's doing. True, Tony agreed. But it's worth asking. If the Republic is as corrupt as he claimed, and the Jedi enable that corruption, what's the right way to change things? Wait for the system to fix itself? Work within broken structures that protect the powerful? You sound like you're defending him, Ahsoka said, a note of accusation in her voice. I'm questioning assumptions, Tony corrected. There's a difference. I'm not saying Dooku's right. Bombing civilians is never right. But I am saying that maybe he started with legitimate grievances before the dark side twisted him into something monstrous. Understanding how good people become villains is important. It's the only way to prevent it from happening again. Ahsoka considered this, her young face showing wisdom beyond her years. Master Anakin says you think Supreme Chancellor Palpatine might be corrupt. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious pattern, Tony replied. I'm not accusing anyone yet. I'm investigating. There's a difference. He returned to his work, making adjustments to the arc reactor's power distribution network. Tell me about Palpatine. What's he like? Grandfatherly, Ahsoka said immediately. Kind, patient, wise. He always has time to listen to Anakin's concerns, gives good advice. The Senate respects him. The Jedi trust him. He's guided the Republic through the worst crisis in 1,000 years, while accumulating emergency powers and extending his term indefinitely, Tony added. I'm not saying he's evil, Ahsoka. I'm saying he's positioned himself perfectly. If I wanted to take over a democracy, that's exactly how I'd do it. Be beloved, indispensable. The only one people trust to solve the crisis. Then make sure the crisis never ends. But he's helping us win the war. Is he? Tony challenged. You said the Separatists are withdrawing and consolidating. That sounds like they're preparing for a long conflict, not losing. And every battle, win or lose, gives Palpatine justification to expand his authority. Who profits from a war that grinds on indefinitely? Ahsoka had no answer. She left shortly after, clearly troubled by the questions Tony had raised. He felt a twinge of guilt. She was young, idealistic, not ready for the cynicism that came from seeing too many heroes reveal themselves as villains. But better she learn to question now than wake up one day in a dictatorship wondering how it happened. C-3PO approached cautiously. Sir, if I may say so, questioning the Supreme Chancellor is quite dangerous. If word reaches the wrong ears, then I'll deal with it, Tony interrupted. I've pissed off governments before. At least this time I'm on a planet I can't get deported from. He activated the repaired gauntlet, watching power flow through the circuits with satisfying efficiency. Speaking of which, I need information on Coruscant's power grid. Who controls it? Who has access to infrastructure records? Any unusual energy consumption patterns? Whatever for. Sir? Because if there's a Sith Lord hiding on this planet, he's using power for something. Training facilities, hidden bases, dark side rituals, whatever evil space wizards do in their spare time. Unusual energy consumption might point to hidden locations. Tony pulled up a holographic map of Coruscant, its endless cityscape daunting in scope. Somewhere in this urban labyrinth is a needle I need to find. Time to start eliminating haystacks. The droid's photoreceptors flickered with what might have been concern. Sir, the infrastructure records are classified, accessible only to government officials and security personnel. I couldn't possibly... But I could, said a new voice from the doorway. Tony turned to find Padme Amidala standing there, still in senatorial robes but with a determined expression that reminded him of Pepper Potts at her most formidable. Behind her, looking distinctly uncomfortable, stood Anakin Skywalker. Senator, Tony greeted. Come to help me commit treason against the Republic? I prefer to think of it as patriotic investigation, Padme replied, entering the workshop with confident strides. I have senatorial access to infrastructure records, ostensibly for oversight purposes. If we're careful, I can pull the data without raising alarms. You realize this could destroy your career if we're wrong, Tony pointed out. And it could save the Republic if we're right, Padme countered. I didn't become a senator to play politics while democracy dies. Anakin told me what you said about Palpatine. I've had similar suspicions for years, but no way to investigate without exposing myself. Tony looked at Anakin. And you're okay with this? Investigating your mentor? The Jedi's jaw tightened. Chancellor Palpatine has been good to me. He's been a friend when the Council wouldn't listen. But... He paused, conflict evident in his expression. But Senator Amidala is right. If there's even a chance the war is being manipulated, we have to investigate, even if it means questioning people I trust. Brave, Tony acknowledged. Also potentially stupid, but brave. He expanded the holographic map, highlighting infrastructure nodes. Okay, here's what I need. Power consumption records for the past 3 years, cross-referenced with known government facilities and private holdings. Any location drawing significantly more power than its official purpose requires becomes a point of interest. Padme studied the map with a politician's eye for detail. That could be thousands of locations. Coruscant uses more energy in a day than some entire star systems. Which is why we filter, Tony explained. We eliminate residential areas, public facilities, known industrial zones. We're looking for hidden consumption. Power being diverted through shell corporations, dummy accounts, locations that don't officially exist. The kind of things someone would use if they wanted a secret base on the galaxy's capital planet. That will still take weeks to analyze, Anakin observed. Tony grinned. Not with my algorithms. C-3PO, how's your computational power? Think you can handle parallel data processing? The droid straightened proudly. Sir, I am quite capable of complex calculations, though I must point out that data analysis is not typically within a protocol droid's primary functions. Consider this your upgrade, Tony replied. He began coding a search algorithm, his fingers flying across the holographic interface with practiced speed. I'll teach you pattern recognition protocols. Between your processing and my methodology, we can crack this in days instead of weeks. Padme pulled a data chip from her robes. I anticipated you'd need infrastructure access. This contains my senatorial credentials and encryption keys. Don't make me regret this, Mr. Stark. I make most people regret knowing me eventually, Tony admitted, but I'll try to delay it as long as possible. He accepted the chip, already planning how to access Republic databases without triggering security protocols. One more thing. I need information on Count Dooku. Not Jedi propaganda about him falling to darkness. Real information. Who he was, what he believed, why he left. Why? Anakin asked suspiciously. Because he's going to contact me, Tony said with certainty. He's smart, strategic, and he knows I'm an anomaly in his master's plans. Sooner or later he'll reach out, either to recruit me or eliminate me. When that happens, I need to understand who I'm dealing with. Padme and Anakin exchanged glances, silent communication passing between them. Finally the senator nodded. I'll see what I can access from the Senate archives. But Tony, if Dooku does contact you, tell us immediately. He's dangerous, unpredictable. Don't try to handle him alone. Noted, Tony replied, making no promises. He turned back to his work, mind already racing ahead to the next problem, the next solution, the next piece of the puzzle. Somewhere on this planet, a Sith Lord was manipulating a galaxy toward an endgame Tony didn't yet understand. But he would. He'd always been good at solving impossible problems. This was just another equation waiting to be cracked. The Battle of Ryloth should have been a disaster. The Separatist blockade strangled the Twi'lek homeworld with ruthless efficiency, cutting off supplies while droid armies ravaged the surface. The Republic fleet, led by Anakin Skywalker and Admiral Wolf Yularen, faced overwhelming odds. 20 Separatist capital ships against their 7, with more enemy reinforcements jumping in hourly. Standard tactics called for retreat, regrouping, waiting for reinforcements that might arrive too late to save millions of Twi'lek civilians. Tony Stark had other ideas. "This is insane," Admiral Yularen stated flatly, staring at the tactical hologram Tony had projected in the Resolute's war room. "You want to fly directly through the Separatist formation, alone, drawing their fire while our main fleet flanks from above? That's not a strategy, Mr. Stark. That's suicide." "It's misdirection," Tony corrected, making adjustments to the flight path displayed in glowing lines. His armor was fully repaired now, upgraded with Republic power cells that extended his operational time indefinitely. The arc reactor pulsed steadily in his chest, brighter than before. He'd cracked the force interference problem by layering electromagnetic shielding that filtered out the background energy noise. Their tactical computers are programmed to prioritize threats based on power signatures and profile analysis. I'll register as a capital ship-level threat moving at starfighter speeds. Every gun in that blockade will track me, giving you a 3-minute window to break through. 3 minutes, Anakin repeated, studying the projection with calculating eyes. Against that much firepower, you'll be vaporized in 30 seconds. Tony's faceplate slid into place, the HUD coming alive with targeting data and system diagnostics. Your starfighters are fast, but fragile. Your capital ships are tough, but slow. I'm fast and tough, or at least I better be, because I just finished rebuilding the armor and haven't properly stress-tested it. He turned to face the assembled officers, seeing doubt and skepticism in every expression except Anakin's. The Jedi general looked intrigued despite himself. "Look, I get it. You don't know me, don't trust my capabilities, don't want to risk your entire strategy on an outsider. Fair. But right now, you're about to order a conventional assault that will cost you half your fleet and still might fail. I'm offering you an alternative that costs nothing but my neck. Which I'm volunteering." "Why?" Admiral Yularen demanded. "You've made it clear you're not part of the Republic military, not bound by our cause. Why risk your life for Ryloth?" Tony was quiet for a moment, thinking of the Twi'lek refugees he'd seen in the temple, families fleeing occupation, children with haunted eyes, people suffering because of a war they didn't start. He thought of Afghanistan, of caves and terrorists, and the moment he realized his weapons were killing innocents. Some lessons you learned in blood and regret, and they shaped everything that came after. "Because I can help," he said simply. "And because sitting in a workshop while people die isn't something I do anymore. Now, are we doing this or are we having another committee meeting about it?" Anakin grinned. That reckless expression Tony was beginning to recognize as the Jedi's default setting when facing impossible odds. "Admiral, prepare the fleet for flanking maneuver. Captain Rex, coordinate with the ground forces. As soon as we break the blockade, I want dropships ready to deploy." He looked at Tony. "You'll have your 3 minutes. Try not to get killed. Ahsoka would be disappointed." "Tell Ahsoka I'll bring her back a souvenir," Tony replied. "Preferably a destroyed Separatist flagship." 20 minutes later, Tony hung in the void between Ryloth and its blockade, the planet's turquoise atmosphere stretching below him, while Separatist warships loomed ahead like metal leviathans. His armor systems ran final diagnostics, confirming weapons hot, repulsors calibrated, emergency protocols active. Through the comm channel, he heard the Republic fleet moving into position, starfighters launching, clone pilots running through pre-combat checks with machine efficiency. "Iron Man, this is Gold Leader," crackled a clone pilot's voice. "We're in position." "You sure about this, sir?" "Not even a little bit," Tony admitted. "But I've got a reputation to maintain." "Jarvis, you reading me?" Silence answered. The AI remained unresponsive, either destroyed in the dimensional transit or simply incompatible with this universe's technology. Tony had spent hours trying to rebuild Jarvis's matrix using Republic computer systems, but the complexity defeated even his genius. For the first time in years, he was truly alone in the armor. No AI assistance, no instant calculations, just his own mind against impossible odds. Somehow, that felt right. "All ships. This is General Skywalker," Anakin's voice cut through the comm channel. "On Iron Man's signal, we execute flanking maneuver Delta 7. Stay tight, watch your wingmates, and may the Force be with us." May physics be with me, Tony muttered. He ignited the repulsors, feeling the familiar thrum of power as the armor accelerated. All right, you separatist tin cans. Let's see what you got. He shot forward like a missile, the armor's enhanced thrusters pushing him to velocities that would have killed an unprotected pilot. The separatist blockade loomed larger, sensor arrays swiveling to track the anomalous contact. For a few seconds, there was confusion in their ranks. Too small for a ship, too fast for a fighter. Energy signature off the charts. Then their tactical computers made the decision Tony had predicted. Maximum threat? Engage with overwhelming force. Every turbo-laser battery in the blockade opened fire simultaneously. The void lit up with emerald death, hundreds of turbo-laser bolts converging on Tony's position from multiple angles. He twisted through the barrage with desperate agility, repulsors flaring as he executed maneuvers no ship could match. Bolts passed within meters, the heat washing over his shields. One clipped his left leg, alarms shrieking as armor plates superheated. Another grazed his shoulder, spinning him into a chaotic tumble that he barely recovered from. "Still alive," Tony shouted, more to convince himself than inform anyone else. Maybe re-evaluating some life choices, but still alive. He armed the armor's missile systems, micro-munitions he'd fabricated using Republic torpedo technology. Smaller than starfighter ordnance but precisely guided. Not enough to destroy capital ships, but enough to damage sensor arrays, gun emplacements, shield generators. He designated targets with thought commands, the HUD painting firing solutions across 24 priority targets. "Weapons free," he growled, and let loose. Missiles streaked from his armor in waves, contrails painting geometric patterns through the void. They impacted across the separatist formation with devastating precision. Sensor dishes exploding, turbo-laser batteries going dark, shield projectors overloading in cascading failures. Not enough to cripple the blockade, but enough to create exactly the chaos Tony needed. "Now, Anakin," he transmitted. "Move, move, move." The Republic fleet emerged from behind Ryloth's moon like avenging angels. Capital ships accelerating at full burn while starfighters swarmed ahead. The Separatists, caught between tracking Tony and responding to the new threat, experienced fatal hesitation in their tactical computers. Their formation broke as ships maneuvered to face multiple vectors, their overlapping fields of fire collapsing into isolated positions. Tony used the confusion to press his attack, diving between capital ships with insane precision. He targeted the command ship's bridge tower, repulsors blazing as turbolaser fire chased him through narrow gaps between hull sections. A fighter squadron tried to intercept, vulture droids peeling off to engage. Tony destroyed 3 with precisely aimed repulsor blasts before the others scattered, unable to match his maneuverability. "This is Gold Leader. We're through the blockade." "Repeat. We are through. Blue Squadron engaging enemy fighters. They're everywhere. Admiral, enemy reinforcements jumping in from hyperspace. Count them. 7 frigates, 2 cruisers." Tony's sensors confirmed the bad news. Fresh separatist ships materializing at the system's edge, rushing to reinforce their collapsing blockade. The battle was turning into exactly the kind of grinding attrition the Republic couldn't afford. They needed something dramatic, something that would break separatist morale and secure the breach permanently. Tony's eyes fixed on the separatist command ship, a massive Providence-class destroyer bristling with weapons. Its shields flickered, weakened by his missile barrage. The bridge tower rose from its dorsal hull like a castle turret, transparasteel viewports glinting in Ryloth's reflected light. "Terrible idea number 206, Tony muttered, angling toward the command ship at maximum acceleration. "Initiating now." "Iron Man, what are you doing?" Anakin demanded over the comm. "Your trajectory. You're heading straight for their flagship." "Target of opportunity," Tony replied, watching the distance close. "Tell Rex to get those dropships ready. This is about to get loud." Turbo-laser fire intensified as the Separatists realized his intent, desperation replacing tactical calculation in their targeting. Tony juked and rolled through the barrage, armor plates scorching, shields dropping to critical levels. An explosion bloomed to his left, a near miss that would have vaporized him a second earlier. His right repulsor stuttered, damaged beyond the armor's auto-repair capabilities. He compensated with the left, trajectory wobbling but holding. 500 meters from the bridge tower. 300. 100. Tony rotated 90 degrees and fired every remaining missile directly into the transparasteel viewports. The bridge exploded in a blossom of atmosphere and debris, bodies tumbling into space alongside command consoles and tactical displays. The Providence-class destroyer shuddered, its coordination suddenly severed as the command crew died. Secondary explosions rippled through its superstructure, as damaged systems cascaded into catastrophic failure. "Command ship is disabled!" Admiral Yularen announced, triumph in his voice. "All ships, press the attack! Break their formation!" Tony tumbled past the dying destroyer, fighting to stabilize his flight as the damaged repulsor finally failed completely. He had enough power for maneuvering, but sustained combat was over. His arc reactor flickered, pushed beyond recommended tolerances, the palladium core depleting faster than normal as it struggled to maintain armor systems. "Iron Man, you need to return to the Resolute for repairs," Anakin ordered. "You've done enough." "Not yet," Tony gasped, scanning the battlefield through failing sensors. The Republic fleet was pushing through, overwhelming the disorganized separatists with concentrated fire. But those reinforcements were closing fast, 7 frigates armed with long-range missiles that could turn the tide back against them. "Those frigates need to slow them down." "Negative, you're too damaged. Let our bombers handle it." Tony ignored him, redirecting power from life support to thrusters. His HUD flashed warnings about oxygen depletion, but he could hold his breath if necessary. The frigates were maintaining tight formation, probably assuming the Republic would need time to regroup before engaging them. They were wrong. He shot toward the frigates with the last of his acceleration capacity, armor groaning under the stress. At 2 kilometers distance, he emptied his remaining micro-munitions in a spread pattern, not targeting the ships themselves, but the space between them. The missiles detonated in synchronized bursts, creating a debris field of superheated plasma and shrapnel that forced the frigates to break formation or collide. It wasn't much, just a delay, a complication. But sometimes that was enough. "Blue Squadron, frigates are scattered," someone shouted over the comm. "Moving to engage." Tony's vision was graying at the edges. Oxygen deprivation combining with exhaustion to drag him toward unconsciousness. The arc reactor's glow had dimmed to a faint pulse, barely sustaining critical systems. He'd pushed too hard, taken too many risks, operated beyond the armor's specifications for too long. Classic Stark hubris, charging into battles he barely understood against enemies he couldn't predict. But the Republic was breaking through. Dropships were descending toward Ryloth's surface, carrying relief supplies and reinforcements. The blockade was collapsing, separatist ships retreating or surrendering. Millions of Twi'leks would survive because of what happened here today. Not bad for a guy from another universe. "Resolute, this is Iron Man," Tony transmitted weakly. "Requesting immediate pickup. Power critical, oxygen depleted, and I think I broke several ribs. Also, I'm definitely going to need a nap after this." "Hold position," Anakin replied, and Tony could hear the smile in the Jedi's voice. "We're sending a recovery ship. Nice flying, Stark. Reckless, suicidal, completely insane, but nice flying." "I aim to disappoint," Tony murmured, letting his systems enter low power mode. Through the armor's exterior cameras, he watched the battle wind down, Republic forces securing their hard-won victory. It felt strange, fighting for a cause he didn't fully understand, for people he barely knew, in a galaxy that wasn't his home. But it felt right too. Like maybe dimensional exile wasn't just catastrophe. Maybe it was also opportunity. A chance to be Iron Man without the baggage of Earth's politics and expectations, without the ghost of Howard Stark or the weight of the Avengers. Here, he could be exactly who he chose to be, one battle at a time. The recovery ship arrived, its tractor beam locking onto his armor with gentle precision. As they pulled him back toward the Resolute, Tony allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd made a difference today, saved lives, changed outcomes, proved that even in a galaxy governed by the Force, technology and determination still mattered. Somewhere on Coruscant, he knew, Darth Sidious was watching. The Sith Lord would have felt the battle's outcome, sensed the disruption Tony represented. Soon, the masks would come off. the real war would begin. But for now, just for this moment, Tony Stark had won. And that was enough. The holo recording arrived 3 days after Ryloth, delivered through channels so secure that even Republic intelligence couldn't trace them. Tony found it waiting in his workshop terminal, a single encrypted file tagged with a separatist identification code. C-3PO discovered it first, his processors nearly overloading in panic. Sir, this is most irregular. A separatist transmission, directly to your terminal. We must inform the Jedi Council immediately. Tony held up a hand, studying the encryption with professional appreciation. Military grade, layered with algorithmic complexity that suggested serious computational power behind it. Whoever sent this wanted privacy and had the resources to ensure it. Hold on, Goldenrod. Let me see what we're dealing with first. But sir, this could be a virus, a trap, an assassination protocol. Or it could be exactly what I've been waiting for, Tony replied, fingers flying across the holographic interface as he isolated the file in a sandboxed environment. I told Padme that Dooku would reach out eventually. Looks like I was right. He initiated decryption protocols, watching layers of security peel away under his algorithms. Besides, if they wanted to kill me, they'd send droids with blasters, not a politely encrypted message. The file opened, and Count Dooku's aristocratic features materialized in holographic blue. The former Jedi sat in what appeared to be a study, leather-bound volumes visible behind him, artifacts from a dozen cultures arranged with tasteful precision. He looked more like a scholar than a warlord, his white hair and beard meticulously groomed. His expression one of thoughtful intelligence rather than malice. Mr. Stark, Dooku began, his cultured voice carrying the weight of old-world nobility. Forgive the unorthodox method of contact, but I suspect the Jedi monitor your communications rather closely. I am Count Dooku, leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, though I imagine you know that already. Your performance at Ryloth was impressive, reckless, but impressive. You fight with the passion of someone who has lost much and found purpose in protection. Admirable traits. Tony leaned back, arms crossed, watching the recording with narrowed eyes. Dooku's body language was open, non-threatening, designed to project reasonableness rather than intimidation. Classic manipulation tactic. Establish common ground, offer respect, lower defenses. I imagine the Jedi have told you many things about me, Dooku continued. That I fell to darkness, betrayed everything I once stood for, became a monster leading droids and corporations in senseless war. Some of that is even true from a certain point of view. A slight smile crossed his features. But I suspect you're intelligent enough to question their narrative, to wonder what drove a Jedi Master to abandon the order he'd served for 70 years. So I offer you this, truth, unvarnished and uncomfortable. The hologram shifted, showing images Tony recognized from Jedi archives. Dooku as a younger man, training Padawans, standing beside Yoda and other masters. A history of service and dedication. I loved the Jedi Order, Dooku said quietly. I believed in its principles, its mission to bring peace and justice to the galaxy. But I watched that mission corrode over decades, watched the Order become servants to a corrupt republic rather than guardians of the Force. We turned blind eyes to slavery in the Outer Rim because it was politically inconvenient. We enforced laws that protected the wealthy while crushing the desperate. We became enforcers of the status quo, no matter how unjust that status quo had become. Tony found himself leaning forward despite his skepticism. The words resonated uncomfortably with observations he'd made himself. The clone army's ethical implications, the Republic's bureaucratic paralysis, the Jedi's role as military commanders in a war that seemed designed never to end. I left seeking change, Dooku explained. I tried working within the system, appealing to the Senate, arguing before the Council. I was dismissed, patronized, told that my concerns were exaggerated or misplaced. So I left and found others who shared my disillusionment. Planetary governments tired of being exploited by core world corporations. Business leaders sick of Republic regulations that served only to protect their competitors. Common people desperate for something better than the grinding poverty the Republic calls democracy. The hologram shifted again, showing separatist worlds, Gleaming cities, functioning infrastructure, populations that didn't look oppressed so much as organized. Tony noted the selective editing but also the kernel of truth beneath it. Not every separatist system was a dystopian nightmare. Some seemed to function quite well without Republic oversight. I won't lie to you, Mr. Stark. War is ugly, and my hands are stained with blood. I've ordered attacks that killed innocents, made compromises with corporate interests I despise, used methods I once would have found abhorrent. But the Republic forces the same choices on its Jedi generals. Anakin Skywalker has bombed cities. Obi-Wan Kenobi has authorized orbital strikes. And the clones... Dooku's expression hardened. The clones are sentient beings bred to die for a government that considers them property. The Republic's greatest war crime, hidden in plain sight. Tony's jaw tightened. That particular observation hit too close to his own conclusions. I'm not asking you to join the Confederacy, Dooku said, his tone shifting to something more intimate, almost confessional. I know you're too principled for that, too aware of our flaws and compromises. But I'm asking you to question the binary the Jedi present, that Republic equals good and Separatists equals evil. The galaxy is more complex than their dogma allows. Sometimes there are no good sides, only different flavors of corruption and compromise. The question becomes which corruption you can live with, which compromises serve the greater good. The hologram showed Dooku standing now, hands clasped behind his back in a posture Tony recognized from academic lectures. You've begun investigating Supreme Chancellor Palpatine. I know this because you're intelligent, and intelligence inevitably leads to uncomfortable questions about a politician who's consolidated power for 14 years during a conveniently endless crisis. Continue that investigation, Mr. Stark. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. And when you discover truths the Jedi won't acknowledge, know that someone understands the burden of seeing clearly. Dooku stepped closer to the holographic recorder, his eyes seeming to look directly at Tony across the light years. You and I are not so different. We both left comfortable positions because we saw injustice others ignored. We both wield power that frightens those around us. We both know what it means to be alone, to make decisions that cost lives in service of principles we won't abandon. The Jedi will try to make you their weapon, their tool to be aimed at enemies they define. I'm offering you something they never will. Respect for your autonomy, acknowledgement of your intelligence, and honest conversation about the rot consuming this galaxy. The Count paused, then smiled slightly. I suspect this message troubles you. Good. Certainty is the province of fools and zealots. Doubt means you're paying attention. When you're ready to discuss these matters beyond the Jedi's surveillance, send a response to the encryption address embedded in this file. I promise no traps, no ambushes, just conversation between two men trying to navigate an impossible situation. Until then, Mr. Stark, may you find what you're searching for. The hologram dissolved, leaving Tony alone with his thoughts and a protocol droid who looked ready to short-circuit from anxiety. We must tell Master Yoda immediately, C-3PO insisted. This is clearly a recruitment attempt, a manipulation designed to make me think, Tony interrupted quietly. Which is either the most dangerous thing he could have done, or the most honest. He stared at the space where Dooku's hologram had been, mind racing through implications and possibilities. The Count had played it perfectly. No threats, no pressure, just uncomfortable truths wrapped in reasonable arguments. Classic intelligence operation tactics, the kind Tony had seen from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra both. But that didn't make the truths any less uncomfortable. Sir, surely you don't believe... I believe Dooku is a mass murderer who's killed thousands, Tony said firmly. I also believe he made some valid points about Republic corruption and Jedi complicity. Both things can be true simultaneously, Goldenrod. People are complicated, especially the dangerous ones. He pulled up his investigation files on Palpatine, power consumption records, political voting patterns, financial connections between Senate votes, and corporate interests. The data was damning if you knew how to read it, suggesting a web of influence far deeper than any single politician should possess. But it was also circumstantial, patterns rather than proof, the kind of evidence that could be explained away by skilled lawyers and sympathetic judges. Tony needed more. He needed something concrete, something undeniable. And if Dooku's message was bait for a trap, The only way to know was to spring it carefully. C-3PO, log this contact as received, but don't alert the Council yet. I want to think about this. Analyze the implications before we bring the Jedi into it. But sir, that's an order, Goldenrod. Give me 24 hours to process. If I decide to respond, or if anything else happens, we'll inform Master Yoda immediately. Deal? The droid's servos whirred with distress, but his programming compelled obedience. As you wish, sir. Though I must note my strong objections for the record. Noted and logged, Tony replied. He pulled up the encryption address Dooku had mentioned, studying its structure with grudging admiration. Quantum-level security. Probably routed through a dozen relay points across the galaxy. Whoever Dooku had building his communications infrastructure knew what they were doing. The question was whether Tony should use it. On one hand, engaging with the enemy was dangerous, potentially treasonous, and exactly the kind of thing that would make the Jedi revoke what little trust they'd extended. On the other hand, Dooku had information Tony needed. About Palpatine, about the Sith, about the larger game being played. And sometimes the best intelligence came from enemy sources willing to talk. Sir? C-3PO ventured carefully. You have that look. What look? The look you get before doing something Master Skywalker would describe as brilliantly stupid. I've seen it on his face enough times to recognize the pattern. Tony laughed despite himself. Yeah, well, Anakin and I seem to share that particular character flaw. He closed the investigation files, mind made up. I'm going to respond to Dooku. Not to join him, not to betray the Republic, but to gather intelligence. He wants to talk? Fine. Let's talk. And while he's being so forthcoming with uncomfortable truths, maybe I can learn something useful about his Sith master. This is an extraordinarily bad idea, C-3PO stated flatly. Probably, Tony agreed. But it's my extraordinarily bad idea, and I'm taking responsibility for it. Now, help me craft a response that's suspicious enough to be believable but intrigued enough to get me more information. Time to see if Count Dooku is as honest as he pretends to be. As Tony began composing his message, he knew he was crossing a line. The Jedi would see this as betrayal. Anakin would feel personally hurt. Padme would worry about the political implications. But they were thinking like people embedded in galactic politics, playing by rules written generations ago. Tony was thinking like an engineer solving a problem. And sometimes, the best way to understand a system was to poke it and see what broke. Kamino existed in perpetual storm, its endless oceans churning beneath skies pregnant with lightning. The cloning facilities rose from the waves like monolithic teeth, sterile and efficient monuments to biological engineering. Tony Stark stood in an observation deck overlooking the production floors, watching rows of clone troopers in various stages of maturation, infants in acceleration tanks, children learning tactical protocols, young men ready for deployment, an army grown in vats, bred for obedience, shipped across the galaxy to die. Remarkable, isn't it? Said Lama Su, the Kaminoan Prime Minister, his elongated neck allowing him to peer down at Tony with black, emotionless eyes. The finest soldiers in galactic history, created with precision genetic engineering and enhanced training protocols, each unit identical in capability, unified in purpose, perfected through iterative design. You mean slaves, Tony said flatly. Lama Su's expression didn't change. Kaminoans apparently didn't register offense the way most species did. We prefer the term product, Mr. Stark. The clones were commissioned by the Republic, paid for through legal contracts, delivered according to specifications. Their legal status as property is well established in Republic law. Tony's hands clenched inside his gauntlets. He'd come to Kamino ostensibly to study clone production facilities, claiming interest in their genetic engineering techniques for potential medical applications. The Jedi Council, suspicious but unable to justify refusing, had granted permission. Only Anakin knew the real reason. Tony was looking for evidence of the inhibitor chips, the biological control mechanisms he'd discovered in classified Republic files during his investigation of Palpatine's power structure. The chips that could turn loyal soldiers into puppets with a single command. Show me the biological augmentation process, Tony requested, his tone carefully neutral despite the rage simmering beneath. Specifically, any neural modifications or control systems. Ah, you've heard of the behavioral modification biochips, Lama Su said with something approaching pride. Ingenious design, really. Installed during embryonic development, they provide enhanced cognitive function and ensure protocol compliance. Without them, the clones would be prone to independent thought that could compromise unit cohesion. Independent thought. The phrase hung in the air like an indictment. They descended to the neural programming level, where Kamino technicians monitored clone brain development with clinical detachment. Holographic displays showed neural pathways, chemical balances, and, there, embedded in the architecture, the biochips. Small, elegant, and positioned exactly where they could override executive function with external commands. Tony's HUD scanned everything, recording data his armor stored in encrypted files. He focused on one particular clone still in accelerated development, CT-5555, according to his designation. The chip glowed faintly in the scan, its quantum-encrypted programming responding to signals Tony couldn't fully decode without more time and better equipment. These chips, Tony said carefully, they can receive external commands? Override the clone's volition? They ensure protocol compliance, Lama Su repeated, as if that answered everything. The Prime Minister's office and certain authorized Republic officials can activate specific behavioral protocols as needed. Order 66, for instance. What's Order 66? Tony interrupted, his heart rate spiking despite the armor's biological regulation systems. Lama Su tilted his head, considering. A contingency protocol. In the event the Jedi Order is deemed a threat to the Republic, all clone units will execute their Jedi commanders immediately. It's a safeguard, you understand. The clones serve the Republic, not any individual faction. Should the Jedi betray their oaths, the Grand Army must be capable of responding appropriately. Tony felt ice spread through his veins. There it was. The end game. Hidden in plain sight. An army of millions, each with a kill switch aimed at the Jedi. The entire military force the Republic depended on, one command away from executing the Guardians who led them. And the Jedi had no idea, too focused on external threats to see the weapon pointed at their backs. Who authorized this protocol? Tony asked, fighting to keep his voice level. The original order came from the Republic Senate during the Military Creation Act, Lama Su replied. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine's office specifically requested its inclusion, citing historical precedent of force-sensitive coups threatening democratic governments. A sensible precaution, given the Jedi's considerable power. Palpatine. Of course it was Palpatine. Tony forced himself to continue the tour to examine other facilities, to play the role of interested researcher rather than horrified whistleblower. But his mind raced ahead, calculating implications and consequences. This wasn't just corruption or political manipulation. This was genocide machinery, pre-positioned and ready to activate. Every clone trooper fighting beside Jedi, every mission they shared, every bond of trust they'd formed. All of it was a lie, built on a biological time bomb. He thought of Rex, the loyal captain who'd stood guard during his first days after arriving. Of the troopers who'd recovered him after Ryloth, who'd called him Iron Knight, with genuine respect. They didn't know. They couldn't know. Their own brains rewired to accept orders that would make them murder friends without hesitation. Mr. Stark? Lama Su inquired. You seem distressed. Is something wrong with the facilities? Nothing wrong, Tony lied. Just processing. This is sophisticated work. Indeed. We take pride in our craftsmanship. Would you like to see the flash training chambers? Or perhaps the weapons integration facilities? Actually, I've seen enough, Tony said, already backing toward the exit. I need to return to Coruscant, process the data, consult with the Council. You've been very informative. The return journey to Coruscant took 6 hours through hyperspace. 6 hours that Tony spent in the shuttle's cargo bay, pacing like a caged animal while his mind struggled with the weight of what he'd discovered. C-3PO had accompanied him, and now watched anxiously as Tony cycled through anger, horror, and cold calculation. Sir, you're going to wear grooves in the deck plating, the droid observed. Perhaps you should sit down, process your emotions in a calm... There's a kill switch in every clone's brain, Goldenrod, Tony interrupted. A biological trigger that will make them murder the Jedi on command. Millions of soldiers, all weaponized against the people they're sworn to protect. And it was built into them from the start, ordered by Palpatine, hidden in plain sight because no one thought to look. Oh my, C-3PO said faintly. That is... most troubling. Troubling, Tony repeated with bitter laughter. Yeah, that's one word for it. Here's another word. Genocide. Palpatine is preparing to commit genocide against the Jedi Order, and he's going to use their own army to do it. But sir, this is only a contingency protocol. Surely the Supreme Chancellor wouldn't actually... Wake up, C-3PO, Tony snapped. This entire war is orchestrated. The Separatists, the Republic, both sides manipulated by the Sith. Dooku even admitted as much in his message. They created a crisis, built an army with built-in loyalty programming, positioned Jedi as military commanders, so they'd be surrounded by potential executioners. This has been planned for years, probably decades. And the punchline? The Jedi trust Palpatine completely. They'll never see it coming. The droid's photoreceptors dimmed with distress. What will you do? Tony stopped pacing, his mind shifting from panic to strategy. I'm going to tell them. Anakin, Obi-Wan, the Council, everyone. I've got scans, recordings, documentation. Lama Su admitted everything on record because he didn't think it was secret. We're going to expose this, remove the chips, and stop Order 66 before it can be activated. And if Supreme Chancellor Palpatine denies everything, if he claims the protocol is merely a safety measure, justified and legal? Sir, you're accusing the most powerful man in the galaxy of conspiracy to commit genocide. The political implications are the least of my concerns, Tony interrupted. This isn't politics, Goldenrod. This is survival. Either we expose Palpatine and stop this now, or we watch the Jedi Order get slaughtered by the army they've been fighting alongside for 3 years. The shuttle dropped out of hyperspace, Coruscant's gleaming surface filling the viewport. Tony moved to the cockpit, already composing his report in his head. Names, evidence, technical specifications, everything needed to make an undeniable case. The Jedi Council would have to listen. They'd have no choice. But as Coruscant grew larger, a darker thought intruded. If Palpatine was the Sith Lord, and Tony was increasingly certain he was, then he wouldn't have left his conspiracy vulnerable to a single whistleblower. There would be contingencies, fail-safes, ways to discredit or eliminate threats. Tony had just painted a target on himself by investigating Kamino, and Palpatine would know it. C-3PO, once we land, I want you to take copies of all my evidence files to Senator Amidala. Tell her to hide them somewhere secure, somewhere even I don't know about. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or get arrested or wind up dead, she releases everything to the Senate and the HoloNet. Sir, you're frightening me. Good, Tony replied grimly. You should be frightened. We're about to accuse a Sith Lord of treason. This is going to get ugly fast. They landed at the Jedi Temple, and Tony immediately requested an emergency council session. Master Windu, clearly annoyed at the dramatic summons, nevertheless assembled the available masters within the hour. Tony stood in the council chamber's center, surrounded by holograms of Jedi scattered across the galaxy, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. This better be important, Mr. Stark, Mace Windu said coldly. You pulled 3 Jedi generals away from active combat zones. It's important, Tony confirmed. He activated his armor's holographic projector, displaying the data from Kamino in painful detail. The clone army has biological control chips implanted in their brains. These chips can receive external commands that override the clone's free will. One specific command, Order 66, will cause every clone in the Grand Army to immediately execute their Jedi commanders. This protocol was commissioned by Supreme Chancellor Palpatine during the Military Creation Act, and has been active in every clone since the war began. Silence fell across the chamber. Several council members leaned forward, studying the data with expressions shifting from skepticism to horror. Anakin, standing near the doorway, went pale. Obi-Wan's hand moved unconsciously to his lightsaber. This is a serious accusation, Master Yoda said quietly, his ancient eyes boring into Tony. Certain of this evidence, are you? I recorded it myself on Kamino 3 hours ago. The Kaminoans don't even think it's a secret. They consider it a legitimate security protocol. They don't understand that it's a weapon aimed at you. A Twi'lek master whose name Tony didn't know spoke up. Even if this protocol exists, it doesn't prove conspiracy. Emergency contingencies against Force user coups are historically justified. The Sith once ruled through military might. Such safeguards are unfortunate but prudent. Prudent? Tony repeated incredulously. You're defending pre-programmed genocide as prudent? We're considering all possibilities, Mace Windu interjected. But Mr. Stark raises valid concerns. If these chips exist as described, they represent a profound security vulnerability. Even if the protocol was implemented with noble intentions, it could be exploited by separatist intelligence or compromised Republic officials. It was implemented by a Sith Lord, Tony stated bluntly. Palpatine is either Darth Sidious or working directly for him. This entire war, both sides, is orchestrated. The clone army was created specifically to betray you when the time comes, and that time is coming soon. Now the chamber erupted. Multiple masters spoke at once, some demanding proof, others insisting such accusations required evidence beyond circumstantial patterns. Mace Windu called for order, his voice cutting through the chaos. Enough! The chamber fell silent. Windu fixed Tony with an intense stare. These are extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence. You've provided data about the inhibitor chips that we can verify independently. But accusing the Supreme Chancellor of being a Sith Lord? That demands more than patterns and suspicions. I've been gathering evidence for weeks, Tony insisted. Power consumption anomalies, political voting patterns, financial connections, the convenient timing of crises that expand executive authority. Everything points to Palpatine manipulating both sides of this war. And Dooku basically admitted it in... He stopped, realizing too late the trap he'd walked into. Dooku? Anakin repeated, his voice tight with betrayal. You've been communicating with Count Dooku? Every eye in the chamber locked onto Tony. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. He contacted me, Tony said carefully. Sent an encrypted message after Ryloth. I didn't seek him out, didn't betray anyone, didn't provide any information. But yes, I watched his message, and yes, some of what he said made sense. Including hints about a Sith master manipulating the Republic from within. Mace Windu's expression hardened into something dangerous. You received a message from the enemy, and didn't report it immediately. You engaged with separatist propaganda, and now you stand before us making wild accusations against the Supreme Chancellor based on that enemy's suggestions. I'm standing before you with proof of biological kill switches in your army's brains, Tony shot back. Whether I talk to Dooku or not is irrelevant compared to the fact that your soldiers are walking time bombs. Both matters are relevant, a female Jedi Master stated coldly. You admit to consorting with the enemy while investigating the Republic's highest office. This suggests either profound foolishness or deliberate subversion. Tony felt the situation spiraling out of control. They were focusing on his methods instead of his evidence, using his contact with Dooku as reason to dismiss everything he'd discovered. Classic bureaucratic deflection, protecting the powerful by attacking the messenger. Listen to me, Tony said, forcing his voice to remain calm despite his rising panic. I don't care what you think of my methods. I don't care if you trust me or if you consider me an enemy agent. What I care about is that every clone trooper in the Republic has the capacity to murder you on command, and the person who can give that command has been consolidating power for 14 years during a crisis he's probably orchestrating. You can investigate me later, arrest me if you want. Kick me off Coruscant, fine. But first, verify what I found on Kamino. Remove those chips from the clones. Protect yourselves before it's too late. Master Yoda closed his eyes, seeming to retreat into meditation. The chamber waited in tense silence until the ancient Jedi finally spoke. Verify his claims we must. To Kamino, a team will go. The clones examined they will be. Truth or lies, soon we will know. His eyes opened, fixing on Tony with profound sadness. But confined you are, until this matter resolves. Too many questions you have raised. Too many boundaries you have crossed. Trust, once broken, slowly it mends. I'm being detained? Tony asked incredulously. Protected, Obi-Wan said quietly from the doorway. If you're right about Palpatine, and he realizes you know, you've become a target. Keeping you in the temple keeps you safe. And keeps me from causing more trouble, Tony observed bitterly. That too, Mace Windu admitted without apology. Guards will escort you to quarters. You'll remain there until we've investigated your claims. Pray to whatever powers you believe in that you're right, Mr. Stark. Because if you're wrong, you've committed treason against the Republic and blasphemy against its elected leader. The consequences will be severe. Clone troopers entered, different from Rex's unit, their armor bearing red markings Tony didn't recognize. They surrounded him efficiently, weapons not aimed but ready. Tony considered fighting, considered blasting through the temple walls and disappearing into Coruscant's undercity. His armor could do it. He'd escape, continue investigating on his own, maybe even contact Dooku for real this time. But that would confirm their worst suspicions. That would make him the enemy, hunted by both sides. And most importantly, it would prevent the Jedi from investigating the chips, from potentially saving themselves. Fine, Tony said, raising his hands in surrender. I'll go quietly. But when you find out I'm right, when you realize Palpatine has been playing you this entire time, remember that I tried to warn you. Remember that I risked everything to give you a chance to survive what's coming. As the guards escorted him from the council chamber, Tony caught Anakin's eye. The Jedi looked torn, conflicted between friendship and duty. Tony tried to communicate everything he couldn't say aloud. Trust me, investigate thoroughly, protect Padme. Don't let them ignore this because it's uncomfortable. He didn't know if Anakin understood. He didn't know if any of them would act in time. All he knew was that he'd lit a fuse, and now there was nothing to do but wait for the explosion. The temple quarters where they confined Tony were comfortable, luxurious even. Spacious chambers with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Coruscant's endless cityscape. Meditation cushions arranged in geometric patterns. Ancient Jedi texts lining the walls. It was a gilded cage, and Tony paced it like a caged predator, his armor's sensors tracking the 4 clone guards stationed outside his door. 3 days. 3 days of waiting while the Jedi Council investigated his claims. 3 days of C-3PO bringing meals and apologizing for the situation. 3 days of watching Coruscant's traffic streams while his mind calculated escape routes and contingency plans he hoped he wouldn't need. On the 4th day, everything went to hell. It started with distant thunder, except Coruscant didn't have weather, only climate control. Tony's sensors identified the sound immediately. Explosions, multiple locations across the temple district. His HUD activated automatically, scanning for threats through the windows. Smoke rose from 3 different temple spires, and Republic gunships circled like predatory birds. Jarvis, what am I looking at? Tony said reflexively, then cursed as silence answered. No AI, no backup, no instant tactical analysis. Just him and the armor against whatever nightmare was unfolding outside. The door burst open. Not the clone guards. They lay sprawled in the corridor, stunned but alive. Instead, Anakin Skywalker stood there, lightsaber ignited, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "We need to go," Anakin said without preamble. "Now." "What's happening?" "You were right." The words came out like broken glass. About everything. The chips. Palpatine. Order 66. The Council verified it all. They confronted Palpatine 3 hours ago, tried to arrest him for treason. Anakin's voice cracked. "He's a Sith Lord, Tony. He's been one the entire time. And when they tried to take him into custody, he activated the order," Tony finished, ice spreading through his chest. The clones turned on the Jedi. Anakin nodded, his eyes haunted. Across the galaxy. Simultaneously. Thousands of Jedi dead in seconds, killed by the soldiers they trusted. Master Windu is dead. Master Fisto, Master Kohler, Master Teen, all dead trying to arrest Palpatine. The temple is under siege from our own Grand Army. We're evacuating survivors, but there aren't many left. Tony's mind processed the catastrophe in tactical terms, refusing to let horror paralyze him. Where's Padme? Safe, hidden. She has your evidence files, everything she needs to expose Palpatine to the Senate. If there's still a Senate that cares. Anakin deactivated his lightsaber, gesturing urgently toward the corridor. Master Yoda survived. He's gathering whoever he can at the emergency hangar. We have maybe 10 minutes before the clones breach that section. They ran through corridors that had become battlefields. Smoke choked the air. Blaster scorches marked ancient walls and bodies. Both Jedi and clone littered the floor. Tony's helmet filtered the smoke while his HUD painted tactical overlays, identifying threats and escape routes. Young Padawans huddled in corners, protected by older students barely past adolescence themselves. Anakin directed them toward evacuation routes, his presence a beacon of desperate hope. They rounded a corner and walked into an ambush. 20 clone troopers, their armor painted with the distinctive markings of the Coruscant Guard, weapons already aimed and firing. Blue stun bolts filled the corridor. They weren't even bothering with lethal force, so confident in their numerical superiority. Anakin deflected the barrage with his lightsaber, the force guiding his blade through impossible angles. But there were too many, coming from too many directions. A bolt slipped through his defense, catching him in the shoulder. He stumbled, his lightsaber wavering. Tony stepped forward, repulsors flaring to life. The first 3 clones went down before they realized what hit them. Precise repulsor blasts that shorted their armor's systems without killing the men inside. Tony had calibrated specifically for this after discovering Order 66, programming non-lethal settings that could disable without destroying. These weren't enemy soldiers. They were victims, their brains hijacked by biological programming they couldn't resist. He wouldn't kill them for being slaves to their own neurology, but he would put them down hard. Tony moved through the clones like a force of nature. Repulsors and tactical strikes coordinated with combat algorithms he'd refined over years of fighting. A clone tried to shoot him point blank. Tony caught the blaster, crushed it, and rendered the trooper unconscious with a precisely calculated strike to the helmet. Another attempted to flank. Micro-missiles from Tony's shoulder launchers deployed flashbang variants that disoriented the entire squad. 30 seconds after the ambush began, 20 clones lay unconscious in the corridor. Anakin stared, clutching his shoulder. How did you... Non-lethal protocols, Tony explained quickly, helping the Jedi to his feet. Developed them after Kamino just in case. The clones aren't responsible for this, Anakin. They're victims too. We disable them, we escape, and we figure out how to fix this mess. They continued toward the hangar, collecting survivors along the way. Ahsoka appeared from a side corridor, her white lightsabers dripping with the evidence of recent combat. Her eyes red from tears, but her jaw set with determination. Behind her came a group of younglings, maybe 20 children ranging from 6 to 12 years old, all terrified but maintaining the composure their training demanded. Master! Ahsoka gasped, relief flooding her features. I thought you were... The clones? They just started shooting and I couldn't... I know, Snips, Anakin said gently, using the nickname despite the circumstances. You did good getting the younglings out. Stay close. We're almost to the hangar. They descended through levels that grew progressively more damaged, evidence of fighting that had raged through the temple's heart. Tony's sensors detected energy signatures ahead, lightsabers, multiple signatures, moving with the coordinated precision of Jedi Knights making a stand. The emergency hangar was chaos. Maybe 50 Jedi had made it there, ranging from masters to Padawans, all defending a handful of transports while clone forces pressed from multiple entrances. Obi-Wan Kenobi stood at the center, his blue lightsaber a beacon of calm amidst the storm, directing defenses and coordinating evacuation. Master Yoda was already aboard one transport, using the Force to deflect incoming fire while younglings scrambled to safety. Anakin! Obi-Wan shouted over the din. Get those survivors aboard! We're out of time! A massive explosion rocked the hangar as clone engineers breached the northern wall. Droidekas rolled through the gap, their shields flickering to life as they unfolded and began firing with devastating accuracy. 2 Jedi Knights went down immediately, their lightsabers unable to deflect the concentrated barrage. Tony targeted the droidicas with his remaining missiles, depleting his arsenal to create an opening. The explosions wouldn't destroy the shielded droids, but they'd buy seconds, and seconds were all they needed. "Everyone aboard now!" Obi-Wan commanded, his Jedi authority cutting through panic. "Leave nothing behind!" They scrambled for the transports, Jedi covering the retreat while Tony's armor provided suppressing fire that kept clone forces pinned. Ahsoka herded younglings aboard with desperate efficiency. Anakin physically carried wounded Jedi, his force-enhanced strength allowing him to move two at a time. Tony was the last aboard, his armor's systems flashing critical warnings. Power cells depleted, missiles exhausted, one repulsor failing, arc reactor running hot from sustained combat. He collapsed into a transport seat as the ships lifted off, their engines screaming protest as they accelerated through the hangar's emergency exits. Clone gunships gave chase immediately, their weapons tracking the fleeing transports. Tony's sensors counted 15 pursuers, their targeting computers locking on. They were going to be shot down before they escaped Coruscant's atmosphere. "Evasive maneuvers," Obi-Wan ordered from the pilot's seat. "All transports scatter. Different vectors. Don't make it easy for them." The transports split, each taking random trajectories through Coruscant's sky lanes. Clone gunships followed, their superior speed and firepower closing the distance. One transport took a direct hit, its shields failing as it spiraled toward the surface in a controlled crash that would kill everyone aboard. Tony forced himself upright despite his armor's protests. "Get me to an airlock." "What?" Anakin turned from where he was treating wounded Jedi. "Tony, you can barely stand. Your armor is about to make those gunships regret chasing us," Tony interrupted. He staggered toward the transport's rear airlock, systems rerouting power from non-essential functions to repulsors. "Open this door, and don't wait for me. Get these people to safety." "Stark, don't be foolish," Obi-Wan called from the cockpit. "You can't take on 15 gunships alone. Watch me." The airlock opened, and Tony fell into Coruscant's sky. The wind hit like a physical blow, tumbling him through the air at terminal velocity. His HUD flickered, barely functional, but he managed to stabilize after 3 terrifying seconds of freefall. Below, Coruscant's endless cityscape stretched in every direction. Above, the transports scattered while gunships closed in for kills. Tony targeted the nearest gunship, calculating trajectories with mental math that would have been instant with Jarvis, but now required conscious effort. He fired his remaining functional repulsor, the beam catching the gunship's port engine. The craft yawed wildly, its pilot fighting for control. Tony flew closer, grabbed the gunship's hull with magnetic grips built into his gauntlets, and tore into its systems with desperate efficiency. The clones inside weren't his enemies. He reminded himself of that as he disabled their weapons, their engines, their control systems. They were victims. Slaves to biological programming Palpatine had installed. So Tony didn't kill them. He just made their gunship unflyable, sending it into a controlled descent toward a landing platform while he kicked off toward the next target. 14 gunships left. His armor was failing. The arc reactor pulsed irregularly, damaged beyond his ability to repair mid-flight. Every movement cost power he couldn't spare. Every attack depleted reserves that wouldn't recharge, but the transports were getting away. Already 2 had jumped to hyperspace, their passengers safe. The others were almost to the atmosphere's edge, seconds from escape. Tony disabled 3 more gunships through sheer determination and increasingly risky maneuvers. The 4th one caught him with a direct hit, a laser cannon that punched through his damaged chest plate and scorched the arc reactor's housing. Pain exploded through his torso as superheated metal touched flesh. The reactor flickered, dimmed, and for a terrifying moment, Tony thought it would fail completely. It didn't. The reactor stabilized at 50% capacity, enough to keep him alive, but not enough to sustain flight much longer. The remaining gunships ignored him. Focusing on the last transport, the one carrying Yoda and the younglings, they formed a firing solution, weapons charging for a simultaneous barrage that would overwhelm the transport's shields and destroy everyone aboard. Tony calculated vectors with a clarity born from desperation. He couldn't reach all the gunships in time, couldn't disable them before they fired, but he could get between them and the transport. could use his armor as a shield for the 30 seconds it would take the transport to reach hyperspace jump coordinates. It was a suicide play. His armor wouldn't survive that much concentrated fire. Neither would he. He did it anyway. Tony positioned himself directly in the gunship's firing line, spread his arms to maximize his profile, and activated every defensive system his failing armor possessed. The shields flickered to life, weak but present. The repulsors stabilized his position, and when the gunships fired, Tony became a human shield absorbing punishment meant for others. Laser fire tore into him from 11 directions. His shields failed in the first second. Armor plates vaporized in the second. The third second brought pain beyond anything Tony had experienced. Beyond the cave in Afghanistan. Beyond the arc reactor's installation. Beyond every battle he'd ever fought. His left arm was gone, severed at the shoulder. His right leg barely functioned. The arc reactor cracked, its containment failing. Palladium core exposed. But the transport reached jump coordinates. Through failing vision, Tony saw it stretch and vanish into hyperspace, carrying Yoda and 20 innocent children to safety. Worth it, Tony thought as he fell. Totally worth it. Coruscant's surface rushed up to meet him. His armor tried to slow the descent, but the repulsors were destroyed, the thrusters offline, everything failing simultaneously. Impact would kill him. Even if he survived it, the damaged arc reactor would poison him within hours. He'd saved the younglings, saved Yoda, given the surviving Jedi a chance to regroup, to fight back, to maybe save the galaxy from whatever Palpatine was building. Not bad for a guy from another universe. Tony closed his eyes, accepting what came next. He'd lived as Iron Man. He'd die as Iron Man. There were worse endings. Then something caught him. Not physically, but through a force he didn't understand. His descent slowed, stopped, reversed. He hung suspended in midair while Coruscant's traffic flowed around him in shocked patterns. Tony's fading consciousness registered a presence, massive and ancient, holding him through means that defied physics. Master Yoda's voice echoed in his mind, strained with effort, but determined. Fall, you will not. Owe you a debt, we do. Owe you everything. A ship materialized, not a Republic transport, but something sleeker, faster, painted with colors Tony didn't recognize. Its cargo bay opened and the invisible force guided him inside, gentle despite its power. Through failing sensors, Tony saw Anakin at the controls, Ahsoka beside him, both their faces masks of desperate hope. Stay with us, Tony, Anakin said, his voice barely penetrating Tony's consciousness. We're getting you to a medical facility. You're going to make it. Tony wanted to respond, wanted to say something characteristically sarcastic to lighten the mood. But darkness was closing in, his body shutting down from trauma and power loss. The last thing he registered before unconsciousness claimed him was the arc reactor's fading light, and Ahsoka's voice, young and frightened and determined. Don't you dare die on us, Iron Knight. We need you. The galaxy needs you. Then nothing but darkness, and the distant sound of hyperspace engines carrying him toward an uncertain future. Tony woke to the smell of Bacta and the steady beep of medical equipment. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim lighting of what appeared to be a medical bay, but not Republic standard issue. The equipment was older, salvaged, jury-rigged from a dozen different systems. Through a viewport, he could see stars streaming past in the distinctive patterns of hyperspace travel. Welcome back, said a familiar voice. Tony turned his head, or tried to. His neck was immobilized, and the movement sent warning signals through his HUD. Wait. HUD. He looked down and found himself still in the armor's undersuit, though the external plates had been removed. His left arm was encased in a regeneration sleeve, synthetic flesh visible through the transparent material. His right leg bore similar treatment, and his chest. The arc reactor had been replaced, not with Earth technology, that would be impossible, but with something that approximated its function. A Kyber crystal, small and pale blue, sat in a housing that merged Jedi technology with Tony's own designs. It pulsed with steady light, generating power through principles Tony didn't fully understand but could feel working. What? Tony's voice came out as a croak. What is this? Obi-Wan Kenobi stepped into view, looking 20 years older than he had a week ago. His robes were travel-stained, his beard unkempt, his eyes carrying the weight of recent horrors. But his expression was gentle as he examined Tony's condition. A Kyber crystal, Obi-Wan explained. From my own lightsaber, actually. You were dying, Mr. Stark. The palladium core in your reactor was shattered, poisoning your blood while failing to generate sufficient power. Master Yoda suggested using a Kyber crystal as a replacement. They generate energy through the Force, infinitely renewable and self-sustaining. It was experimental. You gave me your lightsaber crystal? Tony processed that information slowly. Obi-Wan, Jedi don't give up their lightsabers. That's like giving up part of your soul. Yes, well, Obi-Wan smiled sadly. You gave up considerably more saving those younglings. It seemed a fair trade. Besides, I can always find another crystal. You can't exactly grow another arc reactor. Tony tried to sit up, managed about 30 degrees before his body protested. How long was I out? 4 days. We've been traveling since then, moving between hidden safe houses and sympathetic systems. The galaxy has changed considerably while you were unconscious. Obi-Wan's expression darkened. Palpatine declared himself Emperor 3 hours after the Temple attack. The Republic is gone, replaced by the Galactic Empire. The Senate still exists, but it's a puppet institution now. And the Jedi... He paused, composing himself. The Jedi Order is declared an enemy of the state. Any Force-sensitive found by Imperial forces is to be executed on sight. We're fugitives, Tony. All of us. The full weight of the catastrophe settled over Tony like a physical burden. He'd tried to warn them, tried to expose Palpatine before it was too late. But he'd been too slow, too careful, too worried about proof and procedure. And now millions were dead. Democracy was destroyed, and the survivors were running for their lives. The younglings? Tony asked. Yoda? Safe, for now. Master Yoda took them to a hidden sanctuary, a location only a handful of Jedi know. He's beginning their training anew, teaching them to survive in a galaxy that hunts them. Obi-Wan moved to the viewport, staring out at hyperspace. Anakin and Ahsoka are coordinating with other survivors, building a network of safe houses and resistance cells. Senator Amidala is working behind the scenes in the Senate, gathering allies who oppose the Empire. And you're the man who bought us time to evacuate, the Iron Knight who stood against an army so children could escape. Tony laughed bitterly, the sound painful in his damaged chest. Some night, I got my ass kicked and nearly died doing it. You succeeded, Obi-Wan corrected firmly. Against impossible odds, with failing equipment, you succeeded. Those younglings are alive because you chose to be a shield rather than a sword. That's what being a Jedi is supposed to mean, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even at cost to yourself. I'm not a Jedi, Tony pointed out. I can't even use the Force. I'm just a guy in a suit with too much education and not enough common sense. You're more than that, said a new voice. Master Yoda shuffled into the medical bay, his cane tapping against the deck plating. The ancient Jedi looked diminished somehow, as if recent events had finally acknowledged his 900 years. But his eyes remained sharp, ancient wisdom burning behind them. A warrior you are, yes, but also a teacher. Shown us truths we refused to see, you did. Made us question our arrogance, our blindness. Without your warnings, no survivors would there be. The Order would be ash and memory, nothing more. Tony felt uncomfortable with the praise. I didn't do enough. I should have moved faster, gathered more evidence, forced you to act sooner. Carry guilt for our failures you will not, Yoda interrupted, his ears flattening. Our choices, our consequences. Trusted Palpatine we did, when trust we should not have. Ignored the clone's nature, when examine it we should have. Arrogant we were, and paid dearly we have. Your responsibility, this is not. Then whose responsibility is it? Tony demanded, frustration bleeding into his voice. Because someone needs to be held accountable for this disaster. Someone needs to fix it. Fix it we will, Yoda said quietly. But rebuilding the Order, the work of generations it is. First, survive we must, then resist, then perhaps reclaim what was lost. He approached Tony's bedside, studying the Kyber crystal in his chest with ancient eyes. Bonded to you, the crystal has. Responds to your will, feeds on your determination. A connection to the force it gives, small but real. Feel it, can you? Tony closed his eyes, reaching for whatever connection Yoda meant. At first, nothing. Just the familiar hum of the armor's systems, the pain in his regenerating limbs. Then, beneath that, something else. A current he couldn't name, like standing in a river while being part of the water itself. It didn't feel mystical or magical. It felt natural, inevitable, like gravity or thermodynamics. A fundamental force of the universe he'd simply never had the tools to detect before. I feel something, Tony admitted, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm not force sensitive. The crystal shouldn't work for me at all. The force works through all living things, Obi-Wan explained. Some hear its voice more clearly, can consciously manipulate its currents. Others simply benefit from its presence, finding luck and intuition where others find only chance. You fall somewhere in between now. Not a Jedi, but not entirely mundane either. The crystal bridges the gap. Tony opened his eyes, looking down at the glowing crystal in his chest. Another piece of alien technology keeping him alive. Another reminder that he was no longer the man who'd built the first armor in a cave. He'd been changed by this galaxy, transformed by its conflicts and crises into something new. So what now? Tony asked. The Empire controls the galaxy. The Jedi are fugitives, and I'm a dimensional refugee with a glowing rock in my chest. What's the plan? Yoda's ears perked up, a gleam of something approaching humor in his ancient eyes. A plan, have you not? So certain of this I am. Always planning, Tony Stark is. Never sitting still. Never accepting defeat. So tell us. What now? Tony considered. The smart move was running. Find a quiet planet in the outer rim. Build a workshop. Stay out of Imperial attention. He'd done his part. Tried to save the Jedi. Nearly died in the attempt. No one would blame him for retiring, for prioritizing his own survival over a lost cause. But that wasn't who he was anymore. Maybe it never had been. Not really. Ever since Afghanistan. Ever since watching his weapons kill innocents and deciding to become something better. Running hadn't been an option. You saw injustice. You fought it. You saw people suffering. You helped them. Simple principles that led to complicated choices, but principles worth dying for. We build a resistance, Tony said, his mind already racing ahead to logistics and tactics. The Empire is powerful, but it's new. Systems that just lost their autonomy. Military officers uncomfortable with dictatorship. Populations who remember democracy. Those are potential allies. We start small, hit soft targets. Rescue force sensitives before the Empire finds them. We gather resources, intelligence, and support. And we prepare for the long war, because Palpatine didn't build this Empire overnight. And we're not going to tear it down overnight either. Obi-Wan stroked his beard, considering. A dangerous path. The Empire will hunt us relentlessly. Every victory will be temporary. Every safe house potentially compromised. Many will die. Many are already dying, Tony countered. The question is whether we die hiding or die fighting. I know which option I prefer. And your search for home? Yoda asked gently. Return to your universe. You still wish to? Yes? Tony paused. He'd spent weeks obsessing over dimensional physics, researching methods to recreate the accident that brought him here. But somewhere between Kamino and the temple's fall, that goal had shifted. This galaxy needed him. These people, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, the younglings he'd saved, they'd become more than missions or responsibilities. They'd become something approaching family. I'll keep researching, Tony said finally. But it's not my priority anymore. I came here by accident, but I'm staying by choice. This universe gave me a Kyber crystal for a heart and a second chance to make a difference. Least I can do is fight for it. Yoda nodded slowly, satisfaction evident in his expression. Wise, You have become strange for one so young, but wise nonetheless. The door to the medical bay opened, and Anakin entered with Ahsoka close behind. Both looked exhausted, but determined, their presence filling the room with barely contained energy. Anakin's eyes went immediately to Tony, relief flooding his features. You're awake. Thank the Force. We were starting to worry the Bacta tank wasn't working. Takes more than a dozen gunships to kill me, Tony said with false bravado. Though I admit it was close. How's Padme? Anakin's expression tightened. Safe, hidden. She's using her senatorial position to gather intelligence on Imperial movements. But it's getting harder. Palpatine, the Emperor, he's consolidating power fast. The military is being reorganized. Clone commanders being replaced by human officers loyal to the Empire. And he's building something called the Inquisitorius. Force-sensitive agents trained to hunt surviving Jedi. Former Jedi mostly, Ahsoka added, her montrals drooping with sorrow. People who couldn't resist the dark side's pull or were captured and broken. They know our tactics, our hiding places, our way of thinking. They'll be the most dangerous hunters we face. Tony absorbed this information, his strategic mind already calculating implications. Then we need to stay mobile, avoid patterns, operate in cells that can't compromise each other if captured. Classic guerrilla tactics, hit and fade. Never give them a static target. Easier said than done when you're glowing blue, Anakin observed, gesturing at the Kyber crystal. That thing is going to show up on every Force-sensitive's radar for kilometers. You're a beacon, Tony. Then I'll be bait, Tony replied. Draw attention while you move freely. Use my visibility as an asset rather than a liability. Obi-Wan shook his head. Martyrdom is noble but impractical. We need your mind, Mr. Stark. Your ability to see patterns others miss, to question assumptions, to engineer solutions to impossible problems. You're more valuable alive than as a distraction. He's right, Ahsoka agreed. You warned us about Palpatine when no one else would. You found the inhibitor chips when we'd accepted the clones without question. You saved the younglings when you could have saved yourself. We need that kind of thinking if we're going to survive, let alone fight back. Tony looked around the medical bay at the faces of the survivors. Jedi who'd lost everything. Warriors who'd been betrayed by the galaxy they'd sworn to protect. Refugees in their own home. They were looking at him with something approaching hope, as if his presence somehow made victory possible. It was terrifying. It was humbling. And it was exactly the kind of impossible responsibility Tony Stark could never walk away from. All right, he said, forcing himself to sit up despite his body's protests. Let's talk strategy. The Empire controls the core worlds, but the Outer Rim is still lawless. We establish bases there. Hidden facilities where we can train Force sensitives and build resistance infrastructure. We need ships, weapons, allies, and we need them fast, before Palpatine finishes consolidating power. Obi-Wan, you've got contacts in the underworld from your time fighting Dooku. Use them. Anakin, work with Padme on recruiting sympathetic senators. Ahsoka, coordinate with other Jedi survivors. Build a communications network that the Empire can't intercept. And you? Anakin asked. Tony looked down at his damaged armor, at the regeneration sleeves on his limbs, at the Kyber crystal glowing in his chest. I'm going to rebuild my armor properly, using what I've learned about Force technology. The Empire thinks the Jedi are defeated? Let's show them what happens when you combine 1,000 generations of Force mastery with cutting-edge engineering. Time to upgrade. Master Yoda chuckled, a sound that felt impossibly optimistic given the circumstances. The Iron Knight reforged he will be. Stronger, wiser, more dangerous than before. Good this is. Need every advantage we can find, we do. One more thing, Tony added, his expression serious. Count Dooku. He's still out there, still leading the Separatists, or whatever they're called under the Empire. He reached out to me once, tried to recruit me with uncomfortable truths. Maybe it's time I reached back, found out what he really knows about Palpatine's plans. Enemy of my enemy and all that. Dangerous, Obi-Wan warned. Dooku serves the dark side. Any alliance would be temporary at best, treacherous at worst. Everything about this situation is dangerous, Tony countered. But if Dooku has information about Palpatine's endgame, About whatever the Emperor is building, we need it. I can handle one elderly Sith Lord. Probably. Anakin laughed despite himself. That's either the bravest thing I've heard or the stupidest. Why not both? Tony replied with a grin that hurt his face but felt necessary anyway. Besides, someone has to do the stupidly brave things. Might as well be the guy who's already died once this week. The meeting continued, plans forming as survivors became resistance fighters. Tony contributed what he could from his medical bed, his mind racing ahead to technologies he could build, tactics he could implement, ways to turn the Empire's overwhelming strength into exploitable weaknesses. It was what he did best. Solve impossible problems with stubbornness and innovation. Hours later, after the others had left to begin implementing their plans, Tony sat alone in the medical bay, staring at the Kyber crystal in his chest. It pulsed with steady light, feeding him power drawn from the Force itself. An alien technology keeping an alien alive in an alien galaxy, fighting a war that shouldn't have been his responsibility. But it was his responsibility now. The moment he'd chosen to warn the Jedi about Palpatine, the moment he'd positioned himself between gunships and innocent children, he'd made this galaxy his home, and these people, his family. There was no going back, no returning to the comfortable detachment of an outsider observing someone else's war. Tony Stark had fallen into the Star Wars galaxy by accident. But he would fight for it by choice, using every ounce of genius and determination he possessed to ensure that Palpatine's empire didn't stand unopposed. The Jedi Order had fallen, but the Force endured. Democracy had been destroyed, but hope survived. And as long as Tony Stark drew breath, powered by a Kyber crystal and sustained by stubborn refusal to give up, the Resistance would have its Iron Knight. Jarvis, Tony said quietly to the empty medical bay, old habits stronger than memory. Note to self, when you accidentally save a galaxy, make sure to stick around for the sequel. Things are just getting interesting. Silence answered. But somehow, Tony thought the Kyber crystal pulsed a little brighter, as if the Force itself approved of his determination. Outside the viewport, hyperspace streamed past in bands of light, carrying them toward uncertain futures and impossible challenges. But Tony had faced impossible before. He'd built his first armor in a cave with scraps. He'd flown a nuclear missile through a wormhole. He'd stood against gods and monsters and survived. This was just another impossible problem waiting to be solved. And Tony Stark had always been very, very good at solving problems. The war was just beginning, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave an Earth genius a Kyber crystal and a reason to fight. The legends would come later, whispered in cantinas across the Outer Rim and coded into rebel intelligence reports. They would speak of the Iron Knight, the warrior who fell from the stars during the Clone Wars and changed everything. Some versions claimed he was a Force ghost given physical form. Others insisted he was an ancient weapon awakened by the galaxy's need. The truth, that he was simply a man from another universe who refused to look away from injustice, was somehow both more mundane and more remarkable than any myth. In the months following the Empire's rise, Tony Stark became something the galaxy had never seen before. He rebuilt his armor using principles that merged Earth engineering with Force technology, creating a synthesis that shouldn't have worked but did. The Kyber crystal in his chest resonated with his determination. Amplifying not his connection to the Force, he would never be a Jedi, but his ability to impose his will on reality through sheer technological innovation. Where Jedi wielded lightsabers and Sith commanded lightning, Tony Stark built armor that could stand against both. The resistance he helped forge operated in shadows, rescuing Force-sensitive children before Inquisitors could find them, sabotaging Imperial facilities, and gathering intelligence on the Empire's vast military machine. Tony's contributions went beyond combat. His ability to see patterns in chaos, to question assumptions no one else thought to challenge, made him invaluable to strategic planning. He taught the surviving Jedi that they didn't need to fight the Empire's battles on the Empire's terms. Technology could compensate for their diminished numbers. Creativity could overcome superior firepower. And most importantly, hope could survive even the darkest times if people refused to surrender it. His relationship with Count Dooku evolved into something complex and dangerous. The Sith Lord, separated from Palpatine's direct control after the Empire's formation, found himself increasingly disillusioned with the monster his master had become. Their conversations, conducted through encrypted channels across months, revealed a shared understanding of the galaxy's corruption and the cost of fighting it. They never became allies, not truly. But they developed a mutual respect, born from seeing clearly what others ignored, even if their responses to that clarity remained fundamentally opposed. Dooku walked the dark side's path, believing power and control were necessary to impose order. Tony chose a harder road, believing that freedom, even with all its chaos and imperfection, was worth dying to protect. Anakin Skywalker, who might have fallen to darkness in another timeline, instead found purpose in protecting what remained of the Jedi Order. His friendship with Tony grounded him, giving him perspective beyond the Jedi's often rigid doctrine. Where the Order taught detachment, Tony advocated for passionate commitment, tempered by moral clarity. Where tradition demanded obedience, Tony encouraged questioning. The two men, both scarred by their pasts and determined to shape better futures, became brothers in all but blood. Warriors who trusted each other's judgment, even when they disagreed about methods. Padme Amidala worked within the Imperial Senate as long as she could, gathering allies and preserving democratic principles even as Palpatine systematically dismantled the Republic's foundations. Her partnership with Tony proved vital. Where he understood technology and tactics, she understood politics and people. Together, they built networks that would eventually coalesce into the Rebel Alliance, planting seeds of resistance that would bloom years later into full rebellion. Master Yoda and the surviving Jedi Council recognized that the Order could never return to what it had been. The galaxy had changed, and they had to change with it or die clinging to obsolete traditions. Tony's presence, his refusal to bow to authority simply because it existed, his insistence on questioning every assumption, catalyzed that transformation. The new Jedi who emerged from exile would be different from their predecessors. More flexible, more willing to adapt, more conscious of their own fallibility. They would be warriors when necessary, but would never again forget that their purpose was service, not authority. The Empire, for its part, branded Tony Stark as one of its most wanted enemies. Palpatine recognized the threat he represented, not just his armor's capabilities, but the hope his survival inspired. Imperial propaganda painted him as a dangerous terrorist, a mad scientist unleashing experimental weapons against lawful order. But in the systems where the Empire's brutality was most evident, where beings suffered under tyranny with no recourse or protection, Tony Stark became something else entirely. He became proof that resistance was possible, that the Empire wasn't invincible, that someone was fighting back. His search for a way home never ceased entirely. Late at night, in workshops hidden in asteroids and on forgotten planets, Tony continued researching dimensional physics, trying to recreate the accident that brought him to this galaxy. But as months became years, that goal transformed from desperate need into distant possibility. He'd found something in this galaxy that Earth had never quite given him. A clear purpose uncomplicated by his past failures, a cause worth every sacrifice, and people who valued him for his choices rather than his name or wealth. Tony Stark had been Iron Man on Earth. In the Star Wars galaxy, he became the Iron Knight, and the difference mattered more than he'd expected. The war against the Empire would span decades. There would be victories and defeats, heroes and martyrs, compromises and triumphs. Tony Stark's role in that struggle couldn't be measured simply in battles won or facilities destroyed. His greatest contribution was philosophical, teaching the galaxy that destiny wasn't inevitable, that even the most carefully orchestrated plans could be disrupted by someone willing to question, to fight, and to refuse surrender even when logic suggested defeat was certain. Years later, when Rebel Alliance historians documented the Empire's rise and the resistance that opposed it, they would struggle to classify Tony Stark. He wasn't a Jedi but wielded technology that drew on the Force. He wasn't a soldier but commanded respect from the galaxy's greatest warriors. He wasn't a leader in any traditional sense but inspired loyalty through competence and integrity. Perhaps that defiance of categorization was itself the point. A reminder that the galaxy's most important figures were often those who refused to fit neatly into existing definitions. On a night when twin suns set over a desert planet where a young farm boy dreamed of adventure, an armored figure stood watching the stars. The Kyber crystal in his chest pulsed with steady light, connecting him to a force he still didn't fully understand, but had learned to trust. His armor, rebuilt and upgraded countless times, bore scars from battles across a dozen worlds. And in his mind, plans formed for the next mission, the next impossible challenge, the next opportunity to prove that technology and determination could stand against tyranny. Tony Stark had fallen into this galaxy by accident. But he had become its Iron Knight by choice, a guardian forged not from prophecy or destiny, but from the simple decision to look at injustice and refuse to look away. The Force might bind the galaxy together, connecting all living things in an invisible web of energy and purpose. But sometimes, what the galaxy needed most wasn't another Jedi or Sith drawing on ancient power. Sometimes, it just needed a genius in armor who was too stubborn to quit. The war continued. The Empire endured. But hope survived in hearts across the stars, kindled by the knowledge that somewhere out there, the Iron Knight still fought. And as long as someone refused to surrender, as long as someone stood against darkness with nothing but determination and courage, the Empire's victory would never be complete. May the Force be with you. Tony Stark had been told 1,000 times. And may your engineering genius save us all, he always replied. In the end, both wishes came true. May the Force be with you. More stories await.